Chapter 20. So in the end, it only took the threat of nuclear war to bring us back together. How romantic is that? Okay, maybe not. Deke Simmons, the sort of man who took an extra hanky to sad movies, approved heartily. Ellie Doherty did not. Here's a strange thing I've noticed. Women are better at keeping secrets, but men are more comfortable with them. A week or so after the Cuban Missile Crisis ended, Ellie called Sadie into her office and shut the door. Not a good sign. She was typically blunt, asking Sadie if she knew any more about me than she had before. "No," Sadie said. "But you've begun again." "Yes." "Do you even know where he lives?" "No, but I have a telephone number." Ellie rolled her eyes, and who could blame her? "Has he told you anything at all about his past? Whether he's been married before? Because I believe that he has been." Sadie stayed silent. "Has he happened to mention if he's left a dropped calf or two behind somewhere? Because sometimes men do that, and a man who's done it once will not hesitate to— Miss Ellie, may I go back to the library now? I've left a student in charge, and while Helen's very responsible, I don't like to leave them too." "Go, go." Ellie flapped a hand at the door. "I thought you liked George," Sadie said as she got up. "I do," Ellie replied, in a tone Sadie told me later that said, "I did." "I'd like him even better, and like him for you better, if I knew what his real name was and what he's up to." "Don't ask, don't tell," Sadie said as she went to the door. "What's that supposed to mean?" "That I love him, that he saved my life. That's all I have to give him in return is my trust, and I intend to give it." Miss Ellie was one of those women accustomed to getting the last word in most situations, but she didn't get it that time. We fell into a pattern that fall and winter. I would drive down to Jody on Friday afternoons. Sometimes on the way I would buy flowers at the florist in Round Hill. Sometimes I'd get my hair cut at the Jody barber shop, which was a great place to catch up on all the local chatter. Also, I'd gotten used to having it short. I could remember wearing it so long it flopped to my eyes, but not why I'd put up with the annoyance. Getting used to jockey shorts over boxers was harder, but after a while my balls no longer claimed to be strangling. We'd usually eat at Al's Diner on those evenings, then go to the football game. And when the football season ended, there was basketball. Sometimes Deke joined us, decked out in his school sweater with Brian the Fightin' Denton Lion on the front. Miss Ellie? Never. Her disapproval did not stop us from going to the Candlewood bungalows after the Friday games. I usually stayed there alone on Saturday nights, and on Sundays I joined Sadie for services at Jody's First Methodist Church. We shared a hymnal and sang many verses of Bringing in the Sheaves. Sowing in the morning, sowing seeds of kindness. The melody and those well-meant sentiments still linger in my head. After church, we'd have the noon meal at her place, and after that I'd drive back to Dallas. Every time I made that drive it seemed longer, and I liked it less. Finally, on a chilly day in mid-December, my Ford threw a rod as if expressing its own opinion that we were driving in the wrong direction. I wanted to get it fixed. That Sunliner convertible was the only car I ever truly loved. But the guy at Killeen Auto Repair told me it would take a whole new engine, and he just didn't know where he could lay his paws on one. I dug into my relatively sturdy cash reserve and bought a 1959 Chevy, the kind with the bodacious gull-wing tail fins. It was a good car, and Sadie said she absolutely adored it, but for me, it was never quite the same. We spent Christmas night together at the Candlewood. I put a sprig of holly on the dresser and gave her a cardigan. She gave me a pair of loafers that are on my feet now. Some things are meant to keep. We had dinner at her house on Boxing Day, and while I was setting the table, Deke's ranch wagon pulled into the driveway. That surprised me, because Sadie had said nothing about company. I was more surprised to see Miss Ellie on the passenger side. The way she stood with her arms folded, looking at my new car, told me I wasn't the only one who'd been kept in the dark about the guest list. But credit where credit is due. She greeted me with a fair imitation of warmth and kissed me on the cheek. She was wearing a knitted ski cap that made her look like an elderly child and offered me a tight smile of thanks when I whisked it off her head. "I didn't get the memo either," I said. Deke pumped my hand. "Merry Christmas, George. Glad to see you. Gosh, something smells good." He wandered off to the kitchen. A few moments later, I heard Sadie laugh and say, "Get your fingers out of that, Deke. Didn't your mama raise you right?" Ellie was slowly undoing the keg buttons of her coat, never taking her eyes from my face. "Is it wise, George?" she asked, "what you and Sadie are doing? Is it wise?" Before I could answer, Sadie swept in with the turkey she'd been fussing over ever since we'd gotten back from the Candlewood bungalows. We sat down and linked hands. "Dear Lord, please bless this food to our bodies," Sadie said, "and please bless our fellowship, one with the other, to our minds and our spirits." I started to let go, but she was still gripping my hand with her left and Ellie's with her right. "And please bless George and Ellie with friendship. Help George remember her kindness, and help Ellie to remember that without George, there would be a girl from this town with a terribly scarred face. I love them both, and it's sad to see mistrust in their eyes. For Jesus' sake, amen." "Amen," Deke said heartily. "Good prayer." He winked at Ellie. I think part of Ellie wanted to get up and leave. It might have been the reference to Bobby Jill that stopped her, or maybe it was how much she'd come to respect her new school librarian. Maybe it even had a little to do with me. I like to think so. Sadie was looking at Miss Ellie with her old anxiety. "That turkey looks absolutely wonderful," Ellie said, and handed me her plate. "Would you help me to a drumstick, George? And don't spare the stuffing." Sadie could be vulnerable, and Sadie could be clumsy. But Sadie could also be very, very brave. How I loved her. Lee, Marina, and June went to the de Morenschilds to see in the new year. I was left to my own lonely devices, but when Sadie called and asked if I'd take her to the New Year's Eve dance at Jody's Bountiful Grange, I hesitated. "I know what you're thinking," she said, "but this'll be better than last year. We'll make it better, George." So there we were at 8 o'clock, once more dancing beneath sagging nets of balloons. This year's band was called the Dominoes. They featured a 4-man horn section instead of the Dick Dale-style surf guitars that had dominated the previous year's dance, but they also knew how to lay it down. There were the same 2 bowls of pink lemonade and ginger ale, one soft and one spiked. There were the same smokers clustered beneath the fire escape in the chill air. But it was better than last year. There was a great sense of relief and happiness. The world had passed under a nuclear shadow in October, but then it had passed back out again. I heard several approving comments about how Kennedy had made the bad old Russian bear back down. Around 9 o'clock, during a slow dance, Sadie suddenly screamed and broke away from me. I was sure she'd spotted John Clayton, and my heart jumped into my throat. But that had been a scream of pure happiness, because the 2 newcomers she'd spotted were Mike Koslaw, looking absurdly handsome in a tweed topcoat, and Bobby Jill Allnett. Sadie ran to them, Ann tripped over someone's foot. Mike caught her and swung her around. Bobby Jill waved to me, a little shyly. I shook Mike's hand and kissed Bobby Jill on the cheek. The disfiguring scar was now a faint pink line. "Doctor says it'll be all gone by next summer," she said. "He called me his fastest healing patient, thanks to you." "I got a part in Death of a Salesman, Mr. A," Mike said. "I'm playing Biff." "Typecasting," I said. "Just watch out for flying pies." I saw him talking to the band's lead singer during one of the breaks and knew perfectly well what was coming. When they got back on the stand, the singer said, "I've got a special request. Do we have a George Amberson and Sadie Dunhill in the house? George and Sadie? Come on up here, George and Sadie. Out of your seats and onto your feet." We walked toward the bandstand through a storm of applause. Sadie was laughing and blushing. She shook her fist at Mike. He grinned. The boy was leaving his face. The man was coming in. A little shyly, but coming. The singer counted off, and the brass section swung into that downbeat I still hear in my dreams. Ba-da-da-ba-da-dee-da-dum. I held my hands out to her. She shook her head, but began to swing her hips a little just the same. "Go get him, Miss Sadie," Bobby Jill shouted. "Do the thing." The crowd joined in. "Go, go, go." She gave in and took my hands. We danced. At midnight, the band played Auld Lang Syne, different arrangement from last year, same sweet song, and the balloons came drifting down. All around us, couples were kissing and embracing. We did the same. "Happy New Year, Joe." She pulled back from me, frowning. "What's wrong?" I'd had a sudden image of the Texas School Book Depository, an ugly brick square with windows like eyes. This was the year it would become an American icon. "It won't. I'll never let you get that far, Lee. You'll never be in that 6th floor window. That's my promise." "George?" "Goose walked over my grave, I guess," I said. "Happy New Year." I went to kiss her, but she held me back for a moment. "It's almost here, isn't it, what you came to do?" "Yes," I said. "But it's not tonight. For tonight, it's just us. So kiss me, honey, and dance with me." I had 2 lives in late 1962 and early 1963. The good one was in Jody and at the Candlewood in Killeen. The other was in Dallas. Lee and Marina got back together. Their first stop in Dallas was a dump just around the corner from West Neely. DeMoor helped them move in. George Boo wasn't in evidence. Neither were any of the other Russian émigrés. Lee had driven them away. They hated him, Al had written in his notes, and below that, he wanted them to. The crumbling red brick at 604 Elsbeth Street had been divided into 4 or 5 apartments bursting with poor folks who worked hard, drank hard, and produced hordes of snot-nosed, yelling kids. The place actually made the Oswald's Fort Worth domicile look good. I didn't need electronic assistance to monitor the deteriorating condition of their marriage. Marina continued to wear shorts even after the weather turned cool, as if to taunt him with her bruises and her sex appeal, of course. June usually sat between them in her stroller. She no longer cried much during their shouting matches, only watched, sucking her thumb or her pacifier. One day in November of 1962, I came back from the library and observed Lee and Marina on the corner of West Neely and Elsbeth shouting at each other. Several people, mostly women at that hour of the day, had come out on their porches to watch. June sat in the stroller wrapped in a fuzzy pink blanket, silent and forgotten. They were arguing in Russian, but the latest bone of contention was clear enough from Lee's jabbing finger. She was wearing a straight black skirt. I don't know if they were called pencil skirts back then or not. And the zipper on her left hip was halfway down. Probably it just snagged in the cloth, but listening to him rave, you would have thought she was trolling for men. She brushed back her hair, pointed at June, then waved a hand at the house they were now inhabiting, the broken gutters dripping black water, the trash and beer cans on the bald front lawn, and screamed at him in English, "You say happy lies, then bring wife and baby to this pigsty." He flushed all the way to his hairline and clutched his arms across his thin chest as if to anchor his hands and keep them from doing damage. He might have succeeded, that time at least, if she hadn't laughed, then twirled one finger around her ear in a gesture that must be common to all cultures. She started to turn away. He hauled her back, bumping the stroller and almost overturning it. Then he slugged her. She fell down on the cracked sidewalk and covered her face when he bent over her. "No, Lee, no more hit me." He didn't hit her. He yanked her to her feet and shook her instead. Her head snapped and rolled. "You!" a rusty voice said from my left. It made me jump. "You, boy!" It was an elderly woman on a walker. She was standing on her porch in a pink flannel nightgown with a quilted jacket over it. Her graying hair stood straight up, making me think of Elsa Lanchester's 20,000-volt home permanent in The Bride of Frankenstein. "That man is beating on that woman. Go down there and put a stop to it." "No, ma'am," I said. My voice was unsteady. I thought of adding, "I won't come between a man and his wife," but that would have been a lie. The truth was that I wouldn't do anything that might disturb the future. "You coward," she said. "Call the cops," I almost said, but bit it back just in time. If it wasn't in the old lady's head and I put it there, that could also change the course of the future. Did the cops come, ever? Al's notebook didn't say. All I knew was that Oswald would never be jugged for spousal abuse. I suppose in that time and that place few men were. He was dragging her up the front walk with one hand and yanking the stroller with the other. The old woman gave me a final withering glance, then clumped back into her house. The other spectators were doing the same. Show over. From my living room, I trained my binoculars on the red brick monstrosity cat-a-corner from me. 2 hours later, just as I was about to give up the surveillance, Marina emerged with a small pink suitcase in one hand and the blanket-wrapped baby in the other. She had changed the offending skirt for slacks and what appeared to be 2 sweaters. The day had turned cold. She hurried down the street, several times looking back over her shoulder for Lee. When I was sure he wasn't going to follow her, I did. She went as far as Mr. Car Wash, 4 blocks down West Davis, and used the pay telephone there. I sat across the street at the bus stop with a newspaper spread out in front of me. 20 minutes later, trusty old George Boo showed up. She spoke to him earnestly. He led her around to the passenger side of the car and opened the door for her. She smiled and pecked him on the corner of the mouth. I'm sure he treasured both. Then he got in behind the wheel, and they drove away. That night there was another argument in front of the Elsbeth Street house, and once again most of the immediate neighborhood turned out to watch. Feeling there was safety in numbers, I joined them. Someone, almost certainly Boo, had sent George and Jean de Mohrenschildt to get the rest of Marina's things. Boo probably figured they were the only ones who'd be able to get in without physical restraints being imposed on Lee. "Be damned if I'll hand anything over," Lee shouted, oblivious of the rapt neighbors taking in every word. Cords stood out on his neck. His face was once more a bright, steaming red. How he must have hated that tendency to blush like a little girl who's been caught passing love notes. De Mohrenschildt took the reasonable approach. "Think, mein Freund, this way, There's still a chance. If she sends the police. He gave a shrug and lifted his hands to the sky. Give me an hour, then, Lee said. He was showing teeth, but that expression was the farthest thing in the world from a smile. It'll give me a chance to put a knife through every one of her dresses and break every one of the toys those fat cats sent to buy my daughter. What's going on? A young man asked me. He was about 20 and had pulled up on a Schwinn. Domestic argument, I guess. Osmond, or whatever his name, right? Russian lady left him? About time, I'd say. That guy there's crazy. He's a commie, you know it? I think I heard something about that. Lee was marching up the porch steps with his head back and his spine straight, Napoleon, retreating from Moscow, when Jean de Mohrenschildt called to him sharply, "Stop it, you stupid Nick!" Lee turned to her, his eyes wide, unbelieving and hurt. He looked at de Mohrenschildt, his expression saying, "Can't you control your wife?" But de Mohrenschildt said nothing. He looked amused, like a jaded theater-goer watching a play that's actually not too bad. Not great, not Shakespeare, but a perfectly acceptable time-passer. Jean, if you love your wife, Lee, for God's sake, stop acting like a spoiled brat. Behave. You can't talk to me like that. Under stress, his southern accent grew stronger. I can, I will, I do, she said. Let us get her things, or I'll call the police myself. Lee said, Tell her to shut up and mind her business, George. De Mohrenschildt laughed cheerily. Today you are our business, Lee. Then he grew serious. I'm losing respect for you, comrade. Let us in now. If you value my friendship, as I value yours, let us in now. Lee's shoulders slumped, and he stood aside. Jean marched up the steps, not even sparing him a glance. But de Mohrenschildt stopped and enveloped Lee, who was now painfully thin, in a powerful embrace. After a moment or two, Oswald hugged him back. I realized, with a mixture of pity and revulsion, that the boy, that was all he was really, had begun weeping. What are they? The young man with the bike asked. Couple of queers? They're queer, all right, I said. Just not the way you mean. Later that month, I returned from one of my weekends with Sadie to discover Marina and June back in residence at the shithole on Elsbeth Street. For a little while, the family seemed at peace. Lee went to work, now creating photographic enlargements instead of aluminum screen doors, and came home, sometimes with flowers. Marina greeted him with kisses. Once she showed him the front lawn where she had picked up all the garbage, and he applauded her. That made her laugh, and when she did, I saw that her teeth had been fixed. I don't know how much George Boo had to do with that, but my guess is plenty. I watched this scene from the corner and was, once more, startled by the rusty voice of the old lady with the walker. It won't last, you know. Could be right, I said. He's probably going to kill her. I've seen it before. Below her electric hair, her eyes surveyed me with cold contempt. And you won't step in to do nothing, will you, Sonny Biscuit? I will, I told her. If things get bad enough, I will step in. That was a promise I meant to keep, although not on Marina's behalf. The day after Sadie's Boxing Day dinner, there was a note from Oswald in my mailbox, although it was signed A. Hiddell. This alias was in Al's notes. The A stood for Alec, Marina's pet name for him during their Minsk days. The communication didn't disturb me since everyone on the street seemed to have gotten one just like it. The flyers had been printed on hot pink paper, probably filched from Oswald's current place of employment, and I saw a dozen or more flapping up the gutters. The residents of Dallas's Oak Cliff neighborhood were not known for putting litter in its place. Protest Channel 9 fascism. Home of segregationist Billy James Hargis. Protest fascist ex-general Edwin Walker. During the Thursday night telecast of the Billy James Hargis so-called Christian Crusade, Channel 9 will give airtime to General Edwin Walker, a right-wing fascist who has encouraged JFK to invade the peaceful peoples of Cuba and who has fomented anti-black, anti-integration hate speak all over the South. If you have doubts about the accuracy of this information, check the TV guide. These two men stand for everything we fought against in World War II, and their fascist ravings have no place on the airwaves. Edwin Walker was one of the white supremacists who tried to bar James Meredith from attending Ole Miss. If you love America, protest the free airtime given to men who preach hate and violence. Write a letter. Better still, come to Channel 9 on December 27 and sit in. A. Hidell, President of Hands Off Cuba, Dallas-Fort Worth branch. I briefly pondered the misspellings, then folded the flyer and put it in the box where I kept my manuscripts. If there was a protest at the station, it wasn't reported in the Slimes Herald the day after the Hargis-Walker telecast. I doubt that anyone turned up, including Lee himself. I certainly didn't. But I tuned into Channel 9 on Thursday night, anxious to see the man Lee, probably Lee, was soon going to try to kill. At first it was just Hargis, sitting behind an office-set desk and pretending to scribble important notes while a canned choir sang the Battle Hymn of the Republic. He was a fattish fellow with a lot of plastered-back black hair. As the choir faded out, he put down his pen, looked into the camera, and said, "Welcome to the Christian Crusade, neighbors. I come with good news. Jesus loves you. Yes, he does, every last one of you. Won't you join me in prayer?" Hargis bent the Almighty's ear for at least 10 minutes. He covered the usual stuff, thanking God for the chance to spread the gospel, and instructing him to bless those who'd sent in love offerings. Then he got down to business, asking God to arm his chosen people with the sword and buckler of righteousness so we could defeat communism, which had reared its ugly head just 90 miles off the shores of Florida. He asked God to grant President Kennedy the wisdom, which Hargis, being closer to the big guy, already possessed, to go in there and root out the tares of godlessness. He also demanded that God put an end to the growing communist threat on American college campuses. Folk music seemed to have something to do with it, but Hargis kind of lost the thread on that part. He finished by thanking God for his guest tonight, the hero of Anzio and the Chosin Reservoir, General Edwin A. Walker. Walker appeared not in uniform, but in a khaki suit that closely resembled one. The creases in his pants looked sharp enough to shave with. His stony face reminded me of the cowboy actor Randolph Scott. He shook Hargis's hand, and they talked about communism, which was rife not just on the college campuses, but in the halls of Congress, and the scientific community as well. They touched on fluoridation. Then they schmoozed about Cuba, which Walker called the cancer of the Caribbean. I could see why Walker had failed so badly in his run for the Texas governorship the year before. At the front of a high school class, he would have put the kids to sleep even in period 1 when they were freshest. But Hargis moved him along, smoothly, interjecting, "Praise Jesus," and "God's witness, brother," whenever things got a little sticky. They discussed an upcoming barnstorm crusade through the South, called Operation Midnight Ride, and then Hargis invited Walker to clear the air concerning certain scurrilous charges of segregationism that have surfaced in the New York press and elsewhere. Walker finally forgot he was on television and came to life. You know, that's nothing but a truckload of commie propaganda. I know it, Hargis exclaimed, and God wants you to tell it, brother. I spent my life in the U.S. Army, and I'll be a soldier in my heart until the day I die. If Lee had his way, that would be in roughly 3 months. As a soldier, I always did my duty. When President Eisenhower ordered me to Little Rock during the civil disturbances of 1957, this had to do with the forced integration of Central High School, as you know. I did my duty. But, Billy, I'm also a soldier of God, a Christian soldier. Praise Jesus. And as a Christian, I know that forced integration is just flat out wrong. It's Constitution wrong, states' rights wrong, and Bible wrong. Tell it, Hargis said, and wiped a tear from his cheek, or maybe it was sweat that had oozed through his makeup. Do I hate the Negro race? Those who say that and those who worked to drive me from the military service I loved are liars and communists. You know better. The men I served with know better, and God knows better. He leaned forward in the guest's chair. Do you think the Negro teachers in Alabama and Arkansas and Louisiana and the great state of Texas want integration? They do not. They see it as a slap in the face to their own skills and hard work. Do you think that Negro students want to go to school with whites naturally better equipped for reading, writing, and arithmetic? Do you think real Americans want the sort of race mongrelization that will result from this sort of mingling? Of course they don't. Praise Jesus. I thought about the sign I'd seen in North Carolina, the one pointing to a path bordered with poison ivy. Colored, it had said. Walker didn't deserve killing, but he could certainly do with a brisk shaking. I'd give anyone a big old praise Jesus on that one. My attention had wandered, but something Walker was now saying brought it back in a hurry. It was God, not General Edwin Walker, who ordained the Negro position in his world when he gave them a different skin color and a different set of talents, more athletic talents. What does the Bible tell us about this difference? And why the Negro race has been cursed to so much pain and travail? We only have to look at the 9th chapter of Genesis, Billy. Praise God for his holy word. Walker closed his eyes and raised his right hand, as if testifying in court. And Noah drank of the wine, and was drunken, and lay uncovered. Ham saw the nakedness of his father, and told them who stood without. But Shem and Japheth, one father of the Arab race, one father of the white race. I know you know this, Billy, but not everybody does. Not everybody has the good old Bible learning we got at our mother's knees. Praise God for Christian mothers. You tell it. Shem and Japheth didn't look. And when Noah awoke and found out what had been going on, he said, Cursed be Canaan. He shall be a servant even unto servants, a hewer of wood and a drawer of water. I snapped the TV off. What I saw of Lee and Marina during January and February of 1963 made me think of a T-shirt Christy sometimes used to wear during the last year of our marriage. There was a fiercely grinning pirate on the front with this message below him. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Plenty of beatings took place at 604 Elsbeth Street that winter. We in the neighborhood heard Lee's shouting and Marina's cries, sometimes of anger, sometimes of pain. Nobody did anything, and that included me. Not that she was the only wife to take regular beatings in Oak Cliff, The Friday and Saturday night fights seemed to be a local tradition. All I remember wanting during those dismal gray months was for the squalid, endless soap opera to be over so I could be with Sadie full time. I would verify that Lee was solo when he attempted to kill General Walker, then conclude my business. Oswald acting alone once didn't necessarily mean he'd been acting alone both times, but it was the best I could do. With the I's dotted and the T's crossed, most of them anyway, I would pick my time and place and shoot Lee Oswald as coldly as I had shot Frank Dunning. Time passed, slowly, but it passed. And then one day, not long before the Oswalds moved into the apartment on Neely Street above my own, I saw Marina talking to the old lady with the walker and the Elsa Lanchester hair. They were both smiling. The old lady asked her something. Marina laughed, nodded, and held her hands out in front of her stomach. I stood at my window with the curtain drawn back, my binoculars in one hand and my mouth hanging open. Al's notes had said nothing about this development, either because he didn't know or didn't care. But I cared. The wife of the man I'd waited for 4 years to kill was once again pregnant. Chapter 21. The Oswalds became my upstairs neighbors on March 2nd, 1963. They hand-carried their possessions, mostly in liquor store cartons, from the crumbling brick box on Elsbeth Street. Soon the wheels of the little Japanese tape recorder were turning on a regular basis, but mostly I listened in with the earphones. That way the conversations upstairs were normal instead of slowed down, but of course I couldn't understand much of it anyway. The week after the Oswalds moved into their new digs, I visited one of the pawn shops on Greenville Avenue to buy a gun. The first revolver the pawnbroker showed me was the same Colt .38 model I'd bought in Derry. "This is excellent protection against muggers and homebreakers," the pawnbroker said. "Dead accurate up to 20 yards. 15, I said. I heard 15. The Pawnee raised his eyebrows. "Okay, say 15. Anyone stupid enough to try mugging me out of my cash is going to be a lot closer than that. That's how the pitch goes. To brace you is going to be in at close quarters, so what do you say?" My first impulse, just to break that sense of chiming but slightly discordant harmony, was to tell him I wanted something else, maybe a .45. But breaking the harmony might be a bad idea, who knew? What I did know was that the .38 I'd bought in Derry had done the job. "How much?" "Let you have it for 12. That was $2 more than I'd paid in Derry, but of course that had been 4.5 years ago. Adjusting for inflation, 12 seemed about right. I told him to add a box of bullets, and he had a deal. When the broker saw me putting the gun and the ammo in the briefcase I'd brought along for that purpose, he said, "Why don't you let me sell you a holster, son? You don't sound like you're from around here, and you probably don't know, but you can carry legal in Texas. No permit needed if you don't have a felony record. You got a felony record?" "No, but I don't expect to be mugged in broad daylight." The broker offered a dark smile. "On Greenville Avenue, you can never tell what's going to happen. Man blew his own head off just a block and a half from here a few years ago." "Really?" "Yes, sir. Outside a bar called the Desert Rose. Over a woman, of course. Don't that figure?" "I guess," I said, "although sometimes it's politics." No. At the bottom, it's always a woman, son." I'd found a parking space 4 blocks west of the pawn shop, and in order to get back to my new to me anyway, car, I had to pass Faith Financial, where I'd laid my bet on the Miracle Pirates in the fall of 1960. The Sharpie who'd paid off my $1,200 was standing out front having a smoke. He was wearing his green eye shade. His eyes passed over me, but seemingly without interest or recognition. That was on a Friday afternoon, and I drove straight from Greenville Avenue to Killeen, where Sadie met me at the Candlewood Bungalows. We spent the night, as was our habit that winter. The next day, she drove back to Jody, where I joined her on Sunday for church. After the benediction during the part where we shook hands with the people all around us, saying, "Peace be with you," my thoughts turned not comfortably to the gun, now stowed in the trunk of my car. Over the Sunday noon meal, Sadie asked, "How much longer until you do what you have to do?" "If everything goes the way I hope, not much more than a month." "And if it doesn't?" I scrubbed my hands through my hair and went to the window. "Then I don't know." "Anything else on your mind?" "Yes," she said calmly. "There's cherry cobbler for afters. Would you like whipped cream on yours?" "Very much," I said. "I love you, honey." "You better," she said, getting up to fetch dessert, "because I'm kind of out on a limb here." I stayed at the window. A car came rolling slowly down the street, an oldie but a goodie, as the jocks on K-Life said, and I felt that harmonic chime again. But I was always feeling it now, and sometimes it meant nothing. One of Christie's AA slogans came to my mind, FEAR, fear, standing for false evidence appearing real. This time a click of association came, though. The car was a white over red Plymouth Fury, like the one I'd seen in the parking lot of the Warumbo Mill, not far from the drying shed where the Rabbit Hole into 1958 came out. I remembered touching the trunk to make sure it was real. This one had an Arkansas plate instead of a Maine one, but still, that chime, that harmonic chime. Sometimes I felt that if I knew what that chime meant, I'd know everything. Probably stupid, but true. The yellow card man knew, I thought. He knew, and it killed him. My latest harmonic signaled left, turned at the stop sign, and disappeared toward Main Street. "Come eat dessert, you," Sadie said from behind me, and I jumped. The AAs say FEAR, fear, stands for something else as well. Fuck everything and run. When I got back to Neely Street that night, I put on the earphones and listened to the latest recording. I expected nothing but Russian, but this time I got English as well, and splashing sounds. Marina speaks Russian. Lee: "I can't, Mama. I'm in the tub with Junie." More splashing and laughter. Lee's and the baby's high chortle. Lee: "Mama, we got water on the floor." Junie splash. "Bad girl." Marina: "Mop it up. I busy. Busy." But she is also laughing. Lee: "I can't. You want the baby to—" Russian. Marina speaks Russian, scolding and laughing at the same time. More splashing. Marina is humming some pop song from K-Life. It sounds sweet. Lee: "Mama, bring us our toys." Marina: Da, always you must have the toys." Splashing, loud. The door to the bathroom must be all the way open now. Marina speaks Russian. Lee, pouty little boy's voice: "Mama, you forgot our rubber ball." Big splash. The baby screams with delight. Marina: "There, all toys for Prince and Princessa." Laughter from all three. Their joy turns me cold. Lee: "Mama, bring us a—" Russian word. "We have water on our ear." Marina, laughing: "Oh my God, what next?" I lay awake a long time that night, thinking of the three of them. Happy for once. And why not? 214 West Neely wasn't much, but it was still a step up. Maybe they were even sleeping in the same bed. June, for once, happy, instead of scared to death. And now a fourth in the bed as well, the one growing in Marina's belly. Things began to move faster as they had in Derry, only now Time's arrow was flying toward April 10th instead of Halloween. Al's notes, which I had depended on to get me this far, became less helpful. Leading up to the attempt on Walker's life, they concentrated almost solely on Lee's actions and movements, and that winter there was a lot more to their lives, Marina's in particular. For one thing, she had finally made a friend. Not a sugar daddy wannabe like George Boo, but a woman friend. Her name was Ruth Payne, and she was a Quaker lady. "Russian speaker," Al had noted in a laconic style not much like his earlier notes. "Met at party 2-63. Marina separated from Lee and living with the Payne woman at the time of the Kennedy assassination." And then, as if it were no more than an afterthought, "Lee stored MC in Payne garage, wrapped in blanket." By MC, he meant the mail-order Mannlicher Carcano rifle with which Lee planned to kill General Walker. I don't know who threw the party where Lee and Marina met the Paynes. I don't know who introduced them. De Mohrenschildt? Boo? Probably one or the other, because by then the rest of the emigres were giving the Oswalds a wide berth. Hubby was a sneering know-it-all. Wifey, a punching bag who'd passed up God knew how many chances to leave him for good. What I do know is Marina Oswald's potential escape hatch arrived behind the wheel of a Chevrolet station wagon, white over red, on a rainy day in the middle of March. She parked at the curb and looked around dubiously, as if not sure she'd come to the right address. Ruth Payne was tall, although not as tall as Sadie, and painfully thin. Her brownish hair was banged over a huge expanse of forehead in front and flipped in back, a style that did not flatter her. She wore rimless glasses on a nose splashed with freckles. To me, peering through a crack in the curtains, she looked like the kind of woman who steered clear of meat and marched in ban the bomb demonstrations. And that was pretty much who Ruth Payne was, I think. A woman who was New Age before New Age was cool. Marina must have been watching for her because she came clattering down the outside stairs with the baby in her arms. A blanket flipped up over June's head to protect her from the drifting drizzle. Ruth Payne smiled tentatively and spoke carefully, putting a space between each word. "Hello, Mrs. Oswald. I'm Ruth Payne. Do you remember me?" "Da," Marina said. "Yes." Then she added something in Russian. Ruth replied in the same language, although haltingly. Marina invited her in. I waited until I heard the creak of their footsteps above me, then donned the earphones connected to the lamp bug. What I heard was a conversation in mixed English and Russian. Marina corrected Ruth several times, sometimes with laughter. I understood enough to figure out why Ruth Payne had come. Like Paul Gregory, she wanted Russian lessons. I understood something else from her frequent laughter and increasingly easy conversation. They liked each other. I was glad for Marina. If I killed Oswald after his attempt on General Walker, the new agey Ruth Payne might take her in. I could hope. Ruth only came twice to Neely Street for her lessons. After that, Marina and June got in the station wagon and Ruth drove them away. Probably to her home in the posh, at least by Oak Cliff standards, suburb of Irving. That address wasn't in Al's notes. He seemed to care little about Marina's relationship with Ruth, probably because he expected to finish Lee long before that rifle ended up in the Payne's garage. But I found it in the phone directory, 2515 West 5th Street. One overcast March afternoon, about 2 hours after Marina and Ruth had departed, Lee and George de Mohrenschildt showed up in de Mohrenschildt's car. Lee got out carrying a brown paper sack with a sombrero and Pepino's Best Mexican printed on the side. De Mohrenschildt had a six-pack of Dos Equis. They went up the outside staircase, talking and laughing. I grabbed the earphones, heart pumping. At first, there was nothing, but then one of them turned on the lamp. After that, I might have been in the room with them, an unseen third. Please don't conspire to kill Walker, I thought. Please don't make my job harder than it already is. Pardon the mess, Lee said. She doesn't do anything much these days but sleep, watch TV, and talk about that woman she's given lessons to. De Mohrenschildt spoke for a while about some oil leases he was trying to get hold of in Haiti, and spoke harshly of the repressive Duvalier regime. At the end of the day, trucks drive through the marketplace and pick up the dead. Many of them are children who've starved to death. Castro in the front will put an end to that, Lee said grimly. May Providence hasten the day. There was the clink of bottles, probably to toast the idea of Providence hastening the day. How is work, comrade? And how is it you're not there this afternoon? He wasn't there, Lee said, because he wanted to be here. Simple as that. He just punched out and walked away. What can they do about it? I'm the best damn photoprint technician old Bobby Stovall's got, and he knows it. The foreman, his name is... I couldn't make it out. Grave? Says, quit trying to play labor organizer, Lee. You know what I do? I laugh and say, okay, Svenayop, and walk away. He's a pig dick, and everyone knows it. Still, it was clear Lee liked his job, although he complained about the paternalistic attitude and how seniority counted for more than talent. At one point he said, you know, in Minsk, on a level playing field, I'd be running the place in a year. I know you would, my son. It's completely evident. Playing him up, winding him up, I was sure of it. I didn't like it. Did you see the paper this morning? Lee asked. I saw nothing but telegrams and memos this morning. Why do you think I'm here, if not to get away from my desk? Walker did it, Lee said. He joined up with Hargiss's crusade. Or maybe it's Walker's crusade, and Hargis joined up. I can't tell. That fucking midnight ride thing. Anyway, those two ninnies are going to tour the whole South telling people that the NAACP's a communist front. They'll set integration and voting rights back 20 years. Sure, and fomenting hate. How long before the massacres start? Or until someone shoots Ralph Abernathy and Dr. King. Of course King will be shot, de Mohrenschildt said, almost laughing. I was standing up, my hands pressing the earphones tight to the sides of my head, sweat trickling down my face. This was dangerous ground indeed. The very edge of conspiracy. It's only a matter of time. One of them used the church key on another bottle of Mexican beer, and Lee said, someone should stop those two bastards. You're wrong to call our General Walker a nini, de Mohrenschildt said in a lecturely tone. Hargis, yes, okay. Hargis is a joke. What I hear is that he is, like so many of his ilk, a man of twisted sexual appetites, willing to diddle a little girl's cunt in the morning and a little boy's asshole in the afternoon. Man, that's sick! Lee's voice broke like an adolescent's on the last word. Then he laughed. But Walker, eh? There's a very different kettle of shrimp. He's high in the John Birch Society. Those Jew-hating fascists. And I can see a day, not long hence, when he may run it. Once he has the confidence and approval of the other right-wing nut groups, he may even run for office again. But this time, not for governor of Texas. I suspect he has his sights aimed higher. The Senate, perhaps even the White House. That could never happen, but Lee sounded unsure. It's unlikely to happen, de Mohrenschildt corrected, but never underestimate the American bourgeoisie's capacity to embrace fascism under the name of populism or the power of television. Without TV, Kennedy would never have beaten Nixon. Kennedy and his iron fist, Lee said. His approval of the current president seemed to have gone the way of blue suede shoes. He won't never rest as long as Fidel's shitting in Batista's commode. And never underestimate the terror white America feels at the idea of a society in which racial equality has become the law of the land. Nigger, 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 beaner, 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 Lee burst out with a rage so great it was nearly anguish. That's all I hear at work. I'm sure. When the morning news says the great state of Texas, what they mean is the hate state of Texas. And people listen. For a man like Walker, a war hero like Walker, a buffoon like Haggis is nothing but the stepping stone. The way von Hindenburg was a stepping stone for Hitler. With the right public relations people to smooth him out, Walker could go far. Do you know what I think? That the men who knocked off General Edwin Racist America Walker would be doing society a favor. I dropped heavily into a chair beside the table where the little tape recorder sat, its reel spinning. If you really believe, Lee began, and then there was a loud buzz that made me snatch the headphones off. There were no cries of alarm or outrage from upstairs, no swift movement of feet, so unless they were very good at covering up on the spur of the moment, I thought I could assume the lamp bug hadn't been discovered. I put the headphones back on. Nothing. I tried the distance mic, standing on a chair and holding the Tupperware bowl almost against the ceiling. With it I could hear Lee talking and de Mohrenschildt's occasional replies, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. My ear in the Oswald apartment had gone deaf. The past is obdurate. After another 10 minutes of conversation, maybe about politics, maybe about the annoying nature of wives, maybe about newly hatching plans to kill General Edwin Walker, de Mohrenschildt bounded down the outside stairs and drove away. Lee's footfalls crossed above my head, clump, clud, clump. I followed them into my bedroom and trained the distance mic on the place where they stopped. Nothing. Nothing. Then the faint but unmistakable sound of snoring. When Ruth Payne dropped off Marina in June, 2 hours later, he was still sleeping the sleep of Dos Equis. Marina didn't wake him. I wouldn't have woken the bad-tempered little son of a bitch either. Oswald began to miss a lot more work after that day. If Marina knew, she didn't care. Maybe she didn't even notice. She was absorbed with her new friend, Ruth. The beatings had abated a little, not because morale had improved, but because Lee was out almost as frequently as she was. He often took his camera. Thanks to Al's notes, I knew where he was going and what he was doing. One day, after he'd left for the bus stop, I jumped into my car and drove to Oak Lawn Avenue. I wanted to beat Lee's crosstown bus, and I did, handily. There was plenty of slant-style parking on both sides of Oak Lawn, but my red gull-winged Chevy was distinctive, and I didn't want to risk Lee seeing it. I put it around the corner on Wycliffe Avenue, in the parking lot of an Alpha Beta grocery. Then I strolled down to Turtle Creek Boulevard. The houses there were neo-haciendas with arches and stucco siding. There were palm-lined drives, big lawns, even a fountain or two. In front of 4011, a trim man who bore a striking resemblance to the cowboy actor Randolph Scott was at work with a push mower. Edwin Walker saw me looking at him and struck a curt half-salute from the side of his brow. I returned the gesture. Lee Oswald's target resumed mowing, and I moved on. The streets making up the Dallas block I was interested in were Turtle Creek Boulevard, where the General lived, Wycliffe Avenue, where I'd parked, Avondale Avenue, which was where I went after returning Walker's wave, and Oak Lawn, a street of small businesses that ran directly behind the General's house. Oak Lawn was the one I was most interested in because it was going to be Lee's line of approach and route of escape on the night of April 10th. I stood in front of Texas Shoes and Boots, the collar of my denim jacket raised and my hands stuffed in my pockets. About 3 minutes after I took up this position, the bus stopped at the corner of Oak Lawn and Wycliffe. 2 women with cloth shopping bags got off immediately when the doors flopped open. Then Lee descended to the sidewalk. He carried a brown paper bag, like a workman's lunch sack. There was a big stone church on the corner. Lee sauntered over to the iron railing running in front of it, read the notice board, took a small notepad out of his hip pocket and jotted something down. After that, he headed in my direction, tucking the notebook into his pocket as he walked. I hadn't expected that. Al had believed Lee was going to stash his rifle near the railroad tracks on the other side of Oak Lawn Avenue, a good half a mile away. But maybe the notes were wrong, because Lee didn't even glance in that direction. He was 70 or 80 yards away and closing in fast on my position. He's going to notice me and he's going to speak to me, I thought. He's going to say, "Aren't you the guy who lives downstairs? What are you doing here?" If he did, the future would skew off in a new direction. Not good. I stared at the shoes and boots in the show window with sweat dampening the nape of my neck and rolling down my back. When I finally took a chance and shifted my eyes to the left, Lee was gone. It was like a magic trick. I sauntered up the street. I wished I'd put on a cap, maybe even some sunglasses. Why hadn't I? What kind of half-assed secret agent was I, anyway? I came to a coffee shop about halfway along the block, the sign in the window advertising breakfast all day. Lee wasn't inside. Beyond the coffee shop was the mouth of an alley. I walked slowly across it, glanced to my right, and saw him. His back was to me. He had taken his camera out of the paper sack, but wasn't shooting with it, at least not yet. He was examining trash cans. He pulled off the lids, looked inside, then replaced them. Every bone in my body, by which I mean every instinct in my brain, I suppose, was urging me to move on before he turned and saw me, but a powerful fascination held me in place a little longer. I think it would have held most people. How many opportunities do we have, after all, to watch a guy as he goes about the business of planning a cold-blooded murder? He moved a little deeper into the alley, then stopped at a circular iron plate set in a plug of concrete. He tried to lift it. No go. The alley was unpaved, badly potholed, and about 200 yards long. Halfway down its length, the chain link guarding weedy backyards and vacant lots gave way to high board fences draped in ivy that looked less than vibrant after a cold and dismal winter. Lee pushed a mat of it aside and tried a board. It swung out, and he peered into the hole behind it. Axioms about how you have to break eggs to make an omelet were all very fine. But I felt I'd pressed my luck enough. I walked on. At the end of the block, I stopped at the church that had caught Lee's interest. It was the Oak Lawn Church of Latter-day Saints. The notice board said there were regular services every Sunday morning and special newcomer services every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. with a social hour to follow. Refreshments would be served. April 10th was a Wednesday, and Lee's plan, assuming it wasn't de Mohrenschildt's, now seemed clear enough. Hide the gun in the alley ahead of time, then wait until the newcomer's service, and the social hour, of course, was over. He'd be able to hear the worshippers when they came out, laughing and talking as they headed for the bus stop. The buses ran on the quarter hour. There was always one coming along. Lee would take his shot, hide the gun behind the loose board again, not near the train tracks, then mingle with the church folk. When the next bus came, he'd be gone. I glanced to my right just in time to see him emerging from the alley. The camera was back in the paper sack. He went to the bus stop and leaned against the post. A man came along and asked him something. Soon they were in conversation. Batting the breeze with a stranger? Or was this perhaps another friend of de Mohrenschildt's? Just some guy on the street? Or a co-conspirator? Maybe even the famous unknown shooter who, according to the conspiracy theorists, had been lurking on the grassy knoll near Dealey Plaza when Kennedy's motorcade approached. I told myself that was crazy, but it was impossible to know for sure. That was the hell of it. There was no way of knowing anything for sure, and wouldn't be until I saw with my own eyes that Oswald was alone on April 10th. Even that wouldn't be enough to put all my doubts to rest, but it would be enough to proceed on. Enough to kill Junie's father. The bus came growling up to the stop. Secret Agent X-19, also known as Lee Harvey Oswald, the renowned Marxist and wife-beater, got on. When the bus was out of sight, I went back to the alley and walked its length. At the end, it widened out into a big unfenced backyard. There was a 57 or 58 Chevy Biscayne parked beside a natural gas pumping station. There was a barbecue pot standing on a tripod. Beyond the Barbie was the backside of a big, dark brown house, the general's house. I looked down and saw a fresh drag mark in the dirt. A garbage can stood at one end of it. I hadn't seen Lee move the can, but I knew he had. On the night of the 10th, he meant to rest the rifle barrel on it. On Monday, March 25th, Lee came walking up Neely Street carrying a long package wrapped in brown paper. Peering through a tiny crack in the curtains, I could see the words registered and insured stamped on it in big red letters. For the first time, I thought he seemed furtive and nervous, actually looking around at his exterior surroundings instead of at the spooky furniture deep in his head. I knew what was in the package, a 6.5 millimeter Carcano rifle, also known as a Mannlicher Carcano, complete with scope, purchased from Klein's Sporting Goods in Chicago. 5 minutes after he climbed the outside stairs to the second floor, the gun Lee would use to change history was in a closet above my head. Marina took the famous pictures of him holding it just outside my living room window 6 days later, but I didn't see it. That was a Sunday, and I was in Jody. As the 10th grew closer, those weekends with Sadie had become the most important, the dearest things in my life. I came awake with a jerk, hearing someone mutter, "Still not too late," under his breath. I realized it was me, and shut up. Sadie murmured some thick protest and turned over in bed. The familiar squeak of the springs locked me in place and time. The Candlewood Bungalows, April 5th, 1963. I fumbled my watch from the nightstand and peered at the luminous numbers. It was 2:15 in the morning, which meant it was actually the 6th of April. Still not too late. Not too late for what? To back off? To let well enough alone? Or bad enough? come to that. The idea of backing off was attractive, God knew. If I went ahead and things went wrong, this could be my last night with Sadie. Ever. Even if you do have to kill him, you don't have to do it right away. True enough. Oswald was going to relocate to New Orleans for a while after the attempt on the General's life. Another shitty apartment, one I'd already visited, but not for 2 weeks. That would give me plenty of time to stop his clock. But I sensed it would be a mistake to wait very long. I might find reasons to keep on waiting. The best one was beside me in this bed, long, lovely, and smoothly naked. Maybe she was just another trap laid by the obdurate past. But that didn't matter, because I loved her. And I could envision a scenario all too clearly where I'd have to run after killing Oswald. Run where? Back to Maine, of course, hoping I could stay ahead of the cops just long enough to get to the rabbit hole and escape into a future where Sadie Dunhill would be, well, about 80 years old. If she were alive at all. Given her cigarette habit, that would be like rolling 6 the hard way. I got up and went to the window. Only a few of the bungalows were occupied on this early spring weekend. There was a mud or manure-splattered pickup truck with a trailer full of what looked like farm implements behind it, an Indian motorcycle with a sidecar, a couple of station wagons, and a 2-tone Plymouth Fury. The moon was sliding in and out of thin clouds, and it wasn't possible to make out the color of the car's lower half by that stuttery light, but I was pretty sure I knew what it was anyway. I pulled on my pants, undershirt, and shoes. Then I slipped out of the cabin and walked across the courtyard. The chilly air bit at my bed-warm skin, but I barely felt it. Yes, the car was a Fury. And yes, it was white over red. But this one wasn't from Maine or Arkansas. The plate was Oklahoma, and the decal in the rear window read "Go Sooners." I peeked in and saw a scatter of textbooks. Some student, maybe headed south to visit his folks on spring break, or a couple of horny teachers taking advantage of the Candlewood's liberal guest policy. Just another not quite on-key chime as the past harmonized with itself. I touched the trunk, as I had back in Lisbon Falls, then returned to the bungalow. Sadie had pushed the sheet down to her waist, and when I came in, the draft of cool air woke her up. She sat holding the sheet over her breasts, then let it drop when she saw it was me. "Can't sleep, honey?" I had a bad dream and went out for some air. "What was it?" I unbuttoned my jeans, kicked off my loafers. "Can't remember." "Try. My mother always used to say if you tell your dreams, they won't come true." I got into bed with her wearing nothing but my undershirt. My mother used to say if you kiss your honey, they won't come true. "Did she actually say that?" "No." "Well," she said thoughtfully, "it sounds possible. Let's try it." We tried it. One thing led to another. Afterward, she lit a cigarette. I lay watching the smoke drift up and turn blue in the occasional moonlight coming through the half-drawn curtains. I'd never leave the curtains that way at Neely Street, I thought. At Neely Street in my other life, I'm always alone, but still careful to close them all the way. Except when I'm peeking, that is, lurking. Just then I didn't like myself very much. "George?" I sighed. "That's not my name." "I know." I looked at her. She inhaled deeply, enjoying her cigarette guiltlessly, as people do in the land of ago. "I don't have any inside information, if that's what you're thinking, but it stands to reason. The rest of your past is made up, after all. And I'm glad. I don't like George all that much. It's kind of, what's that word you use sometimes? Kind of dorky." How does Jake suit you? As in Jacob? Yes. I like it. She turned to me. In the Bible, Jacob wrestled an angel. And you're wrestling too, aren't you? I suppose I am, but not with an angel. Although Lee Oswald didn't make much of a devil either. I like George de Mohrenschildt better for the devil role. In the Bible, Satan's a tempter who makes the offer and then stands aside. I hoped de Mohrenschildt was like that. Sadie snubbed her cigarette. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were dark. Are you going to be hurt? I don't know. Are you going away? Because if you have to go away, I'm not sure I can stand it. I would have died before I said it when I was there, but Reno was a nightmare. Losing you for good? She shook her head slowly. No, I'm not sure I could stand that. I want to marry you, I said. My God, she said softly. Just when I'm ready to say it'll never happen, Jake alias George says right now? Not right now, but if the next week goes the way I hope it does, will you? Of course, but I do have to ask one teensy question. Am I single? Legally single? Is that what you want to know? She nodded. I am, I said. She let out a comic sigh and grinned like a kid. Then she sobered. Can I help you? Let me help you. The thought turned me cold, and she must have seen it. Her lower lip crept into her mouth. She bit down on it with her teeth. That bad, then, she said musingly. Let's put it this way. I'm currently close to a big machine full of sharp teeth, and it's running full speed. I won't allow you next to me while I'm monkeying with it. When is it? She asked. I don't know, your date with destiny? Still to be determined. I had a feeling that I'd said too much already, but since I'd come this far, I decided to go a little farther. Something's going to happen this Wednesday night. Something I have to witness. Then I'll decide. Is there no way I can help you? I don't think so, honey. If it turns out I can. Thanks, I said. I appreciate that. And you really will marry me? Now that I know your name is Jake? Of course. On Monday morning around 10 o'clock, the station wagon pulled up at the curb and Marina went off to Irving with Ruth Payne. I had an errand of my own to run and was just about to leave the apartment when I heard the thump of footsteps descending the outside stairs. It was Lee, looking pale and grim. His hair was mussy and his face was stippled with a bad breakout of post-adolescent acne. He was wearing jeans and an absurd trench coat that flapped around his shins. He walked with one arm across his chest, as if his ribs hurt, or as if he had something under his coat. Before the attempt, Lee sighted in his new rifle somewhere out by Love Field, Al had written. I didn't care where he sighted it in. What I cared about was how close I'd just come to meeting him face to face. I'd made the careless assumption that I'd missed him going off to work, and why wasn't he at work on a Monday morning, come to that? I dismissed the question and went out carrying my school briefcase. Inside were the never-to-be-finished novel, Al's notes, and the work in progress describing my adventures in the land of ago. If Lee wasn't alone on the night of April 10th, I might be spotted and killed by one of his co-conspirators, maybe even de Mohrenschildt himself. I still thought the odds of that were unlikely, but the odds of having to run away after killing Oswald were better. So were the odds of being captured and arrested for murder. I didn't want anyone, the police, for instance, finding Al's notes or my memoir if either of those things happened. The important thing to me on that 8th of April was to get my paperwork out of the apartment and far away from the confused and aggressive young man who lived upstairs. I drove to the First Corn Bank of Dallas and was not surprised to see that the bank official who helped me bore a striking resemblance to the hometown trust banker who had helped me in Lisbon Falls. This guy's name was Link instead of Deucin, but he still looked like the old-time Cuban band leader, Xavier Cugat. I inquired about safe deposit boxes. Soon enough, the manuscripts were in box 775. I drove back to Neely Street and had a moment of severe panic when I couldn't find the goddamn key to the box. Relax, I told myself. It's in your pocket somewhere, and even if it isn't, your new pal, Richard Link, will be happy to give you a duplicate. Might cost you all of $1. As if the thought had summoned it, I found the key hiding way down in the corner of my pocket under my change. I put it on my key ring, where it would be safe. If I did have to run back to the rabbit hole and stepped into the past again after a return to the present, I'd still have it, although everything that had happened in the last 4.5 years would reset. The manuscripts now in the safe deposit box would be lost in time. That was probably good news. The bad news was that Sadie would be too. Chapter 22. The afternoon of April 10th was clear and warm, a foretaste of summer. I dressed in slacks and one of the sports coats I'd bought during my year teaching at Denholm Consolidated. The .38 police special, fully loaded, went into my briefcase. I don't remember being nervous. Now that the time had come, I felt like a man encased in a cold envelope. I checked my watch. 3:30. My plan was to once more park in the Alpha Beta lot on Wycliffe Avenue. I could be there by 4:15 at the latest, even if the crosstown traffic was heavy. I'd scope out the alley. If it was empty, as I expected it would be at that hour, I'd check the hole behind the loose board. If Al's notes were right about Lee stashing the Carcano in advance, even though he'd been wrong about the place, it would be there. I'd go back to my car for a while, watching the bus stop just in case Lee showed up early. When the 7 p.m. newcomer service started at the Mormon church, I'd stroll to the coffee shop that served breakfast all day and take a seat by the window. I would eat food I wasn't hungry for, dawdling, making it last, watching the buses arrive and hoping that when Lee finally got off one, he'd be alone. I would also be hoping not to see George de Morenschildt's boat of a car. That, at least, was the plan. I picked up my briefcase, glancing at my watch again as I did so, 3:33. The Chevy was gassed and ready to go. If I'd gone out and gotten into it then, as I'd planned to, my phone would have rung in an empty apartment, but I didn't, because someone knocked at the door just as I reached for the knob. I opened it, and Marina Oswald was standing there. For a moment I just gaped, unable to move or speak. Mostly it was her unexpected presence, but there was something else as well. Until she was standing right in front of me, I hadn't realized how much her wide blue eyes looked like Sadie's. Marina either ignored my surprised expression or didn't notice it. She had problems of her own. "Please excuse, have you seen my hubka?" She bit her lips and shook her head a little. "Hubspun?" She attempted to smile, and she had those nicely refurbished teeth to smile with, but it still wasn't very successful. "Sorry, sir, don't speak good English. I'm Belarusia." I heard someone, I guess it was me, ask if she was talking about the man who lived upstairs. "Yes, please, my husband Lee. We live upstairs. This are Malushka, our baby." She pointed at June, who sat at the bottom of the steps in her walker, contentedly sucking on a pacifier. "He go out now all times since he lose his work." She tried the smile again, and when her eyes crinkled, a tear spilled from the corner of the left one and tracked down her cheek. So, Old Bobby Stovall could get along without his best photo print technician after all, it seemed. "I haven't seen him, Mrs. Oswald," almost jumped out, but I held it back in time. And that was good, because how would I know? They got no home delivery, it seemed. There were 2 mailboxes on the porch, but their name wasn't on either of them. Neither was mine. I got no home delivery either. "Oswald," she said, and held out her hand. I shook it, more convinced than ever that this was a dream I was having, but her small dry palm was all too real. "Marina Oswald, I am pleased to meet you, sir." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Oswald, I haven't seen him today." Not true. I'd seen him go out just after noon, not long after Ruth Payne's station wagon swept Marina and June away to Irving. "I'm worried for him," she said. I don't know. Sorry. Don't mean bother for you." She smiled again, the sweetest, saddest smile, and wiped the tears slowly from her face. "If I see him—" Now she looked alarmed. No, say nothing. He don't like me talk to strangers. He come home supper, maybe, for sure." She walked down the steps and spoke Russian to the baby, who laughed and held out her chubby arms to her mother. "Goodbye, Mr. Sir. Many thanks. You say nothing?" "Okay," I said. "Mum's the word." She didn't get that, but nodded and looked relieved when I put my finger across my lips. I closed the door, sweating heavily. Somewhere I could hear not just one butterfly flapping its wings, but a whole cloud of them. Maybe it's nothing. I watched Marina push June's stroller down the sidewalk toward the bus stop, where she probably meant to wait for her husband, who was up to something. That much she knew. It had been all over her face. I reached for the doorknob when she was out of sight, and that was when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but there were only a few people with my number, and one of them was a woman I cared about very much. "Hello?" "Hello, Mr. Amberson," a man said. He had a soft southern accent. I'm not sure if I knew who he was right away. I can't remember. I think I did. "Someone here has something to say to you." I lived 2 lives in late 1962 and early 1963, one in Dallas and one in Jody. They came together at 3:39 on the afternoon of April 10th. In my ear, Sadie began screaming. She lived in a single-story prefab ranch on Bee Tree Lane, part of a 4 or 5 block development of houses just like it on the west side of Jody. An aerial photograph of the neighborhood in a 2011 history book might have been captioned "Mid-Century Starter Homes." She arrived there around 3 o'clock that afternoon, following an after-school meeting with her student library aides. I doubt if she noticed the white over red Plymouth Fury parked at the curb a little way down the block. Across the street, 4 or 5 houses down, Mrs. Holloway was washing her car, a Renault Dauphine that the rest of the neighbors eyed with suspicion. Sadie waved to her when she got out of her VW Bug. Mrs. Holloway waved back. The only owners of foreign and somehow alien cars on the block, they were casually collegial. Sadie went up the walk to her front door and stood there for a moment, frowning. It was ajar. Had she left it that way? She went in and closed it behind her. It didn't catch because the lock had been forced, but she didn't notice. By then, her whole attention was fixed on the wall over the sofa. There, written in her own lipstick, were 2 words in letters 3 feet high. "Dirty cunt." She should have run then. But her dismay and outrage were so great that she had no room for fear. She knew who had done it. But surely Johnny was gone. The man she had married had little taste for physical confrontation. Oh, there had been plenty of harsh words and that one slap, but nothing else. Besides, her underwear was all over the floor. It made a rough trail from the living room down the short hall to her bedroom. All of it. Full slips, half slips, bras, panties, the girdle she didn't need but sometimes wore had been slashed. At the end of the hall, the door to the bathroom stood open. The towel rack had been ripped down. Printed on the tile where it had been, also in her lipstick, was another message. Filthy fucker. The door of her bedroom was also open. She went to it and stood in it with no sense at all that Johnny Clayton was standing behind it with a knife in one hand and a Smith & Wesson Victory .38 in the other. The revolver he carried that day was the same make and model as the one Lee Oswald would use to take the life of Dallas policeman J.D. Tippit. Her little vanity bag lay open on her bed, the contents, mostly makeup, scattered across the coverlet. The accordion doors of her closet were folded open. Some of her clothes still drooped sadly from their hangers. Most were on the floor. All of them had been slashed. "Johnny, you bastard." She wanted to scream those words, but the shock was too great. She could only whisper. She started for the closet, but didn't get far. An arm curled around her neck, and a small circle of steel pressed hard against her temple. "Don't move. Don't fight. If you do, I'll kill you." She tried to pull away, and he lashed her upside the head with the revolver's short barrel. At the same time, the arm around her neck tightened. She saw the knife in the fist at the end of the arm that was choking her and stopped struggling. It was Johnny. She recognized the voice. But it really wasn't Johnny. He had changed. "I should have listened to him," she thought, meaning me. "Why didn't I listen?" He marched her into the living room, arms still around her throat, then spun her and shoved her down on the couch, where she flopped, legs splayed. "Pull down your dress. I can see your garters, you whore." He was wearing bib overalls. That alone was enough to make her feel like she was dreaming, and had dyed his hair a weird orange blonde. She almost laughed. He sat down on the hassock in front of her. The gun was aimed at her midsection. "We're going to call your cock boy." "I don't know what—" "Amberson? The one you play hide the salami with in the hot sheets place over Killeen. I know all about it. I've been watching you a long time." "Johnny, if you leave now, I won't call the police, I promise, even though you spoiled my clothes." "Whore clothes," he said dismissively. I don't know his number." Her address book, the one she usually kept in her little office next to the typewriter, was lying open next to the phone. "I do. It's on the first page. I looked under C for cockboy first, but it wasn't there. I'll place the call so you don't get any ideas about saying something to the operator. Then you talk to him." "I won't, Johnny, not if you mean to hurt him." He leaned forward. His weird orange-blonde hair flopped into his eyes, and he brushed it away with the hand holding the gun. Then he used the knife hand to pluck the phone out of its cradle. The gun remained pointed steadily at her midsection. "Here's the thing, Sadie," he said. And now he sounded almost rational. "I'm going to kill one of you. The other can live. You decide which one it's going to be." He meant every word. She could see it on his face. What if he isn't home?" He chuckled at her stupidity. "Then you die, Sadie." She must have thought, "I can buy some time. It's at least 3 hours from Dallas to Jody, more if the traffic's heavy. Time enough for Johnny to come to his senses. Maybe. Or for his attention to lapse just long enough for me to throw something at him and run out the door." He dialed 0 without looking at the address book. His memory for numbers had always been just short of perfect, and asked for Westbrook 7, 5430. Listened, said, "Thank you, operator." Then silence. Somewhere over 100 miles north, a telephone was ringing. She must have wondered how many rings Johnny would allow before hanging up and shooting her in the stomach. Then his listening expression changed. He brightened, even smiled a little. His teeth were as white as ever, she observed, and why not? He'd always brushed them at least half a dozen times a day. "Hello, Mr. Amberson. Someone here has something to say to you." He got off the hassock and handed Sadie the phone. As she put it to her ear, he slashed out with the knife, quick as a striking snake, and sliced open the side of her face. "What did you do to her?" I shouted. "What did you do, you bastard?" "Hush, Mr. Amberson." He sounded amused. Sadie was no longer screaming, but I could hear her sobbing. "She's all right. She's bleeding pretty heavily, but that'll stop." He paused, then spoke in a tone of judicious consideration. "Of course, she's not going to be pretty anymore. Now she looks like what she is, just a cheap $4 whore. My mother said she was, and my mother was right." "Let her go, Clayton," I said. "Please." "I want to let her go. Now that I've marked her, I want to. But here's what I already told her, Mr. Amberson. I'm going to kill one of you. She cost me my job, you know. I had to quit and go into an electrical treatment hospital, or they were going to have me arrested." He paused. "I pushed a girl down the stairs. She tried to touch me, all this dirty bitch's fault. This one, right here, bleeding into her lap. I got her blood on my hands, too. I will need disinfectant." And he laughed. "Clayton, I'll give you 3.5 hours until 7:30. Then I'll put 2 bullets in her, one in her stomach and one in her filthy cunt." In the background, I heard Sadie scream, "Don't you do it, Jacob!" "Shut up!" Clayton yelled at her. "Shut your mouth." Then, to me, chillingly conversational, "Who's Jacob?" "Me," I said. "It's my middle name. Does she call you that in bed when she sucks your cock boy?" "Clayton," I said. "Johnny, think what you're doing." "I've been thinking about it for over a year. They gave me shock treatments in the electric hospital, you know. They said they'd stop the dreams, but they didn't. They made them worse." "How bad is she cut? Let me talk to her." "No." "If you let me talk to her, maybe I'll do what you're asking. If you don't, I most certainly won't. Are you too fogged out from your shock treatments to understand that?" It seemed he wasn't. There was a shuffling sound in my ear, then Sadie was on. Her voice was thin and trembling. "It's bad, but it's not going to kill me." Her voice dropped. "He just missed my eye." Then Clayton was back. "See? Your little tramp is fine. Now, you just jump in your hot rod Chevrolet and get out here, just as fast as the wheels will roll. How would that be? But listen to me carefully, Mr. George Jacob Amberson, cockboy. If you call the police, if I see a single blue or red light, I will kill this bitch and then myself. Do you believe that?" "Yes." "Good. I'm seeing an equation here where the values balance, the cockboy and the whore girl. I'm in the middle. I'm the equals sign, Amberson. But you have to decide which value gets canceled out. It's your call." "No!" she screamed. "Don't! If you come out here, he'll kill both of us." The phone clicked in my ear. I've told the truth so far, and I'm going to tell the truth here, even though it casts me in the worst possible light. My first thought as my numb hand replaced the phone in its cradle was that he was wrong. The values didn't balance. In one pan of the scales was a pretty high school librarian. and the other was a man who knew the future and had, theoretically at least, the power to change it. For a second, part of me actually thought about sacrificing Sadie and going across town to watch the alley running between Oaklawn Avenue and Turtle Creek Boulevard to find out if the man who changed American history was on his own. Then I got into my Chevy and headed for Jody. Once I got out on Highway 77, I pegged the speedometer at 70, and I kept it there. While I was driving, I thumbed the latches on my briefcase, took out my gun, and dropped it into the inner pocket of my sport coat. I realized I'd have to involve Deke in this. He was old and no longer steady on his feet, but there was simply no one else. He would want to be involved, I told myself. He loved Sadie. I saw it in his face every time he looked at her. And he's had his life, my cold mind said. She hasn't. Anyway, he'll have the same chance the lunatic gave you. He doesn't have to come. But he would. Sometimes the things presented to us as choices aren't choices at all. I never wished so much for my long-gone cell as I did on that drive from Dallas to Jody. The best I could do was a gas station phone booth on SR 109, about a half a mile beyond the football billboard. On the other end, the phone rang 3 times. 4, 5. Just as I was about to hang up, Deke said, "Hello? Hello?" He sounded irritated and out of breath. "Deke, it's George." "Hey, boy." Now, tonight's version of Bill Turkett from that popular and long-running play The Homicidal Husband sounded delighted instead of irritated. "I was out in my little garden beside the house. I almost let it ring, but then—" "Be quiet and listen. Something very bad's happened. Is still happening. Sadie's been hurt. Already. Maybe a lot." There was a brief pause. When he spoke again, Deke sounded younger, like the tough man he had undoubtedly been 40 years and 2 wives ago. Or maybe that was just hope. Tonight, hope and a man in his late 60s was all I had. "You're talking about her husband, aren't you? This is my fault. I think I saw him, but that was weeks ago, and his hair was much longer than in the yearbook picture. Not the same color either. It was almost orange." A momentary pause, and then a word I had never heard from him before. "Fuck." I told him what Clayton wanted and what I proposed to do. The plan was simple enough. Did the past harmonize with itself? Fine, I would let it. I knew Deke might have a heart attack. Turkett had, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I wasn't going to let anything stop me. It was Sadie. I waited for him to ask if it wouldn't be better to turn this over to the police, but of course he knew better. Doug Reams, the Jody constable, had poor eyesight, wore a brace on one leg, and was even older than Deke. Nor did Deke ask why I hadn't called the state police from Dallas. If he had, I would have told him I believed Clayton was serious about killing Sadie if he saw a single flashing light. It was true, but not the real reason. I wanted to take care of the son of a bitch myself. I was very angry. "What time does he expect you, George?" "No later than 7:30. And it's now 1:15 by my watch, which gives us a smidge of time. The street behind B-Tree is Apple something. I disremember just what. That's where you'll be?" "Right, the house behind hers." "I can meet you there in 5 minutes." "Sure, if you drive like a lunatic, make it 10. And bring a prop, something he can see from the living room window if he looks out. I don't know, maybe. Will a casserole dish do?" "Fine. See you there in 10. Before I could hang up, he said, "Do you have a gun?" "Yes." His reply was close to a dog's growl. "Good." The street behind Doris Dunning's house had been Wymore Lane. The street behind Sadie's house was Apple Blossom Way. 202 Wymore had been for sale. 140 Apple Blossom Way had no for sale sign on the lawn, but it was dark and the lawn was shaggy, dotted with dandelions. I parked in front and looked at my watch, 6:50. 2 minutes later, Deke pulled his ranch wagon up behind my Chevy and got out. He was wearing jeans, a plaid shirt, and a string tie. In his hands, he was holding a casserole dish with a flower on the side. It had a glass lid and looked to contain 3 or 4 quarts of chop suey. "Deke, I can't thank you in—" "I don't deserve thanks. I deserve a swift kick in the pants. The day I saw him, he was coming out of the Western Auto just as I was going in. It had to have been Clayton. It was a windy day. A gust blew his hair back, and I saw those hollows at his temples for just a second. But the hair, long and not the same color. He was dressed in cowboy clothes. Shit fire." He shook his head. "I'm getting old. If Sadie's hurt, I'll never forgive myself." "Are you feeling all right? No chest pains or anything like that?" He looked at me as if I were crazy. "Are we going to stand here discussing my health, or are we going to try to get Sadie out of the trouble she's in?" "We're going to do more than try. Go around the block to her house. While you're doing that, I'll cut through this backyard, then push through the hedge and into Sadie's." I was thinking about the Dunning house on Cossett Street, of course, but even as I said it, I remembered that there was a hedge at the foot of Sadie's tiny backyard. I'd seen it many times. "You knock and say something cheery, loud enough for me to hear. By then, I'll be in the kitchen." "What if the back door's locked?" "She keeps a key under the step." "Okay." Deke thought for a moment, frowning, then raised his head. "I'll say Avon calling, special casserole delivery, and raise the dish so he can see me through the living room window if he looks. Will that do?" "Yes. All I want you to do is distract him for a few seconds. Don't you shoot if there's any chance you might hit Sadie. Tackle the bastard. You'll do okay. The guy I saw was skinny as a rail." We looked at each other bleakly. Such a plan would work on Gunsmoke or Maverick, but this was real life. And in real life, the good guys and gals sometimes get their asses kicked or killed. The yard behind the house on Apple Blossom Way wasn't quite the same as the one behind the Dunning place, but there were similarities. For one, there was a doghouse, although no sign reading "Your pooch belongs here." Instead, painted in a child's unsteady hand over the round door-shaped entrance were the words "Butch's House" and "No trick-or-treating kitties." Wrong season. The hedge, however, looked exactly the same. I pushed through it, barely noticing the scratches the stiff branches scrawled on my arms. I crossed Sadie's backyard in a running crouch and tried the door. Locked. I felt beneath the step, sure that the key would be gone because the past harmonized, but the past was obdurate. It was there. I fished it out, put it in the lock, and applied slow, increasing pressure. There was a faint thump from inside the door when the latch sprang back. I stiffened, waiting for a yell of alarm. None came. There were lights on in the living room, but I heard no voices. Maybe Sadie was dead already and Clayton was gone. God, please no. Once I eased the door open, however, I heard him. He was talking in a loud and monotonous drone, sounding like Billy James Hargis on tranquilizers. He was telling her what a whore she was and how she'd ruined his life. Or maybe it was the girl who had tried to touch him he was talking about. To Johnny Clayton, they were all the same, sex-hungry disease carriers. You had to lay down the law. And, of course, the broom. I slipped off my shoes and put them on the linoleum. The light was on over the sink. I checked my shadow to make sure it wasn't going to precede me into the doorway. I took my gun out of my sport coat pocket and started across the kitchen, meaning to stand beside the doorway to the living room until I heard Avon calling. Then I would go in a rush. Only that isn't what happened. When Deke called out, there was nothing cheery about it. That was a cry of shocked fury. And it wasn't outside the front door, it was right in the house. "Oh my God, Sadie!" After that, things happened very, very fast. Clayton had forced the front door lock so it wouldn't latch. Sadie didn't notice, but Deke did. Instead of knocking, he pushed it open and stepped inside with the casserole dish in his hands. Clayton was still sitting on the hassock, and the gun was still pointed at Sadie, but he had put the knife down on the floor beside him. Deke said later he didn't even know Clayton had a knife. I doubt if he really even noticed the gun. His attention was fixed on Sadie. The top of her blue dress was now a muddy maroon. Her arm and the side of the sofa where it dangled were both covered with blood. But worst of all was her face, which was turned toward him. Her left cheek hung in two flaps, like a torn curtain. "Oh, my God, Sadie!" The cry was spontaneous, nothing but pure shock. Clayton turned, upper lip lifted in a snarl. He raised the gun. I saw this as I burst through the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, and I saw Sadie piston out one foot, kicking the hassock. Clayton fired, but the bullet went into the ceiling. As he tried to get up, Deke threw the casserole dish. The cover lifted off. Noodles, hamburger, green peppers, and tomato sauce sprayed in a fan. The dish, still more than half full, hit Clayton's right arm. Chop suey poured out. The gun went flying. I saw the blood. I saw Sadie's ruined face. I saw Clayton crouched on the blood-spotted rug and raised my own gun. "No!" Sadie screamed. "No, don't! Please don't!" It cleared my mind like a slap. If I killed him, I would become the subject of police scrutiny no matter how justified the killing might be. My George Amberson identity would fall apart, and any chance I had of stopping the assassination in November would be gone. And really, how justified would it be? The man was disarmed. Or so I thought, because I didn't see the knife either. It was hidden by the overturned hassock. Even if it had been out in the open, I might have missed it. I put the gun back in my pocket and hauled him to his feet. "You can't hit me." Spit flew from his lips. His eyes fluttered like those of a man having a seizure. His urine let go. I heard it pattering to the carpet. "I'm a mental patient. I'm not responsible. I can't be held responsible. I have a certificate. It's in the glove compartment of my car. I'll show it to you." The whine of his voice, the abject terror in his face now that he was disarmed, the way his dyed orange-blonde hair hung around his face in clumps, even the smell of chop suey, all of these things enraged me. But mostly, it was Sadie, cowering on the couch and drenched in blood. Her hair had come loose, and on the left side it hung in a clot beside her grievously wounded face. She would wear her scar in the same place Bobby Jill wore the ghost of hers. Of course she would. The past harmonizes. But Sadie's wound looked, oh, so much worse. I slapped him across the right side of his face, hard enough to knock spittle flying from the left side of his mouth. "You crazy fuck! That's for the broom!" I went back the other way, this time knocking the spit from the right side of his mouth and relishing his howl in the bitter, unhappy way that is reserved only for the worst things, the ones where the evil is too great to be taken back or ever forgiven. "That's for Sadie." I balled my fist. In some other world, Deke was yelling into the phone. And was he rubbing his chest the way Turcotte had rubbed his? No, at least not yet. In that same other world, Sadie was moaning. "And this is for me." I drove my fist forward, and I said I would tell the truth, every bit of it. When his nose splintered, his scream of pain was music to my ears. I let him go, and he collapsed to the floor. Then I turned to Sadie. She tried to get off the couch, then fell back. She tried to hold her arms out to me, but she couldn't do that either. They dropped into the sodden mess of her dress. Her eyes started to roll up, and I was sure she was going to faint, but she held on. "You came," she whispered. "Oh, Jake, you came for me. You both did." "Beetree Lane," Deke shouted into the phone. "No, I don't know the number. I can't remember it, but you'll see an old man with chop suey on his shoes standing outside and waving his arms. Hurry, she's lost a lot of blood." "Sit still," I said. "Don't try to—" Her eyes widened. She was looking over my shoulder. "Look out! Jake, look out!" I turned, fumbling in my pocket for the gun. Deke also turned, holding the telephone receiver in both of his arthritis-knotted hands like a club. But although Clayton had picked up the knife he'd used to disfigure Sadie, his days of attacking anyone were over. Anyone but himself, that is. It was another scene I'd played before, this one on Greenville Avenue, not long after I'd come to Texas. There was no muddy waters blasting from the desert rose, but here was another badly hurt woman and another man bleeding from another broken nose, his shirt untucked and flapping almost to his knees. He was holding a knife instead of a gun, but otherwise, it was just the same. "No, Clayton," I shouted. "Put it down!" His eyes, visible through clumps of orange hair, were bulging as he stared at the dazed, half-fainting woman on the couch. "Is this what you want, Sadie?" he shouted. "If this is what you want, I'll give you what you want." Grinning desperately, he raised the knife to his throat and cut. Part 5. 11/22/63. Chapter 23. From the Dallas Morning News, April 11th, 1963, page 1. Rifleman takes shot at Walker, by Eddie Hughes. A gunman with a high-powered rifle tried to kill former Major General Edwin A. Walker at his home Wednesday night, police said, and missed the controversial crusader by less than an inch. Walker was working on his income taxes at 9 p.m. when the bullet crashed through a rear window and slammed into a wall next to him. Police said a slight movement by Walker apparently saved his life. "Somebody had a perfect bead on him," said Detective Ira Van Cleve. "Whoever it was certainly wanted to kill him." Walker dug out several fragments of the shell's jacket from his right sleeve and was still shaking glass and slivers of the bullet out of his hair when reporters arrived. Walker said he returned to his Dallas home Monday after the first stop of a lecture tour called Operation Midnight Ride. He also told reporters, from the Dallas Morning News, April 12, 1963, page 7, mental patient slashes ex-wife, commits suicide, by Mac Dugas. Jody. 77-year-old Deacon Deke Simmons arrived too late on Wednesday night to save Sadie Dunhill from being wounded. But things could have been much worse for the 28-year-old Dunhill, a popular librarian in the Denholm Consolidated School District. According to Douglas Reams, the Jody Town constable, if Deke hadn't arrived when he did, Miss Dunhill almost certainly would have been killed. When approached by reporters, Simmons would only say, "I don't want to talk about it. It's over." According to Constable Reams, Simmons overpowered the much younger John Clayton and wrestled away a small revolver. Clayton then produced the knife with which he had wounded his wife and used it to slash his own throat. Simmons and another man, George Amberson of Dallas, tried to stop the bleeding to no avail. Clayton was pronounced dead at the scene. Mr. Amberson, a former teacher in the Denholm Consolidated School District who arrived shortly after Clayton had been disarmed, could not be reached for comment but told Constable Reams at the scene that Clayton, a former mental patient, may have been stalking his ex-wife for months. The staff at Denholm Consolidated High School had been alerted, and Principal Ellen Dougherty had obtained a picture, but Clayton was said to have disguised his appearance. Miss Dunhill was transported by ambulance to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, where her condition is listed as fair. End newspaper quotations. I wasn't able to see her until Saturday. I spent most of the intervening hours in the waiting room with a book I couldn't seem to read, which was all right because I had plenty of company. Most of the DCHS teachers dropped by to check on Sadie's condition, as did almost 100 students, those without licenses driven into Dallas by their parents. Many stayed to give blood to replace the pints Sadie had used. Soon my briefcase was stuffed with get-well cards and notes of concern. There were enough flowers to make the nurse's station look like a greenhouse. I thought I'd gotten used to living in the past. But I was still shocked by Sadie's room at Parkland when I was finally allowed inside. It was an overheated single, not much bigger than a closet. There was no bathroom. An ugly commode that only a dwarf could have used comfortably squatted in the corner, with a semi-opaque plastic curtain to pull across for semi-privacy. Instead of buttons to raise and lower the bed, there was a crank, its white paint worn off by many hands. Of course, there were no monitors showing computer-generated vital signs, and no TV for the patient either. A single glass bottle of something, maybe saline, hung from a metal stand. A tube went from it to the back of Sadie's left hand, where it disappeared beneath a bulky bandage. Not as bulky as the one wrapped around the left side of her head, though. A sheaf of her hair had been cut off on that side, giving her a lopsided, punished look. And, of course, she had been punished. The docs had left a tiny slit for her eye. It and the one on the unbandaged, undamaged side of her face fluttered open when she heard my footsteps, and although she was doped up, those eyes registered a momentary flash of terror that squeezed my heart. Then, wearily, she turned her face to the wall. "Sadie, honey, it's me." "Hi, me," she said, not turning back. I touched her shoulder, which the gown left bare, and she twitched it away. "Please don't look at me." "Sadie, it doesn't matter." She turned back. Sad, morphine-loaded eyes looked at me, one peering out of a gauze peephole. An ugly, yellowish-red stain was oozing through the bandages. Blood and some sort of ointment, I supposed. "It matters," she said. "This isn't like what happened to Bobby Jill." She tried to smile. "You know how a baseball looks, all those red stitches? That's what Sadie looks like now. They go up and down and all around. They'll fade. You don't get it. He cut all the way through my cheek to the inside of my mouth. But you're alive, and I love you. Say that when the bandages come off," she said in her dull, doped-up voice. "I make the Bride of Frankenstein look like Liz Taylor." I took her hand. I read something once. "I don't think I'm quite ready for a literary discussion, Jake." She tried to turn away again, but I held onto her hand. It was a Japanese proverb. If there is love, smallpox scars are as pretty as dimples. I'll love your face no matter what it looks like, because it's yours. She began to cry, and I held her until she quieted. In fact, I thought she'd gone to sleep when she said, "I know it's my fault. I married him, but—" "It's not your fault, Sadie. You didn't know." "I knew there was something not right about him, and still I went ahead. I think mostly because my mother and father wanted it so badly. They haven't come yet, and I'm glad, because I blame them, too. That's awful, isn't it?" "While you're serving up the blame, save a helping for me. I saw that goddamn Plymouth he was driving at least twice dead on, and maybe a couple of other times out of the corner of my eye." "You don't need to feel guilty on that score. The state police detective and the Texas Ranger who interviewed me said Johnny's trunk was full of license plates. He probably stole them at motor courts, they said. And he had a lot of stickers. Oh, what do you call them? Decals. I was thinking of the one that had fooled me at the Candlewood that night. Go Sooners. I'd made the mistake of dismissing my repeated sightings of the white over red Plymouth as just another harmonic of the past. I should have known better. I would have known better if half my mind hadn't been back in Dallas with Lee Oswald and General Walker. And if blame mattered, there was a helping for Deke, too. After all, he had seen the man, had registered those deep dimples on the sides of his forehead. Let it go, I thought. It's happened. It can't be undone. Actually, it could. Jake, do the police know you aren't quite who you say you are?" I brushed back the hair on the right side of her face, where it was still long. "I'm fine on that score." Deke and I had been interviewed by the same policeman who interviewed Sadie before the docs rolled her into the operating room. The state police detective had issued a tepid reprimand about men who had seen too many TV westerns. The ranger seconded this, then shook our hands and said, "In your place, I would have done exactly the same thing." Deke's pretty much kept me out of it. He wants to make sure the school board doesn't get pissy about you coming back next year. It seems incredible to me that being cut up by a lunatic could lead to dismissal on grounds of moral turpitude. But Deke seems to think it's best if I can't go back. I can't face the kids looking like I do now. Sadie, if you knew how many of them have come here. That's sweet. It means a lot. And they're the very ones I couldn't face. Don't you understand? I think I could deal with the ones who'd laugh and make jokes. In Georgia, I taught with a woman who had a hair lip, and I learned a lot from the way she handled teenage cruelty. It's the other ones that would undo me. The well-meaning ones. The looks of sympathy, and the ones who can't stand to look at all. She took a deep, shuddering breath, then burst out, "Also, I'm angry. I know life is hard. I think everyone knows that in their hearts. But why does it have to be cruel as well? Why does it have to bite?" I took her in my arms. The unmarked side of her face was hot and throbbing. "I don't know, honey." "Why are there no second chances?" I held her. When her breathing became regular, I let her go and stood up quietly to leave. Without opening her eyes, she said, "You told me there was something you had to witness on Wednesday night. I don't think it was Johnny Clayton cutting his own throat, was it?" "No." "Did you miss it?" I thought of lying. Didn't. "Yes." Now her eyes opened, but it was a struggle, and they wouldn't stay open for long. "Will you get a second chance?" "I don't know. It doesn't matter." That wasn't the truth. Because it would matter to John Kennedy's wife and children. It would matter to his brothers. Perhaps to Martin Luther King. Almost certainly to the tens of thousands of young Americans who were now in high school and who would, if nothing changed the course of history, be invited to put on uniforms, fly to the other side of the world, spread their nether cheeks, and sit down on the big green dildo that was Vietnam. She closed her eyes. I left the room. There were no current DCHS students in the lobby when I got off the elevator, but there were a couple of alums. Mike Koslaw and Bobby Jill Allnut were sitting in hard plastic chairs with unread magazines in their laps. Mike jumped up and shook my hand. From Bobby Jill, I got a good, strong hug. "How bad is it?" she asked. "I mean," she rubbed the tips of her fingers over her own fading scar. "Can it be fixed?" "I don't know." "Have you talked to Dr. Ellerton?" Mike asked. Ellerton, reputedly the best plastic surgeon in Central Texas, was the doc who'd worked his magic on Bobby Jill. "He's in the hospital this afternoon doing rounds. Deke, Miss Ellie and I have an appointment with him in," I checked my watch, "20 minutes. Would you two care to sit in?" "Please," Bobby Jill said. "I just know he can fix her. He's a genius." "Come on, then. Let's see what the genius can do." Mike must have read my face, because he squeezed my arm and said, "Maybe it's not as bad as you think, Mr. A." It was worse. Ellerton passed around the photographs, stark black and white glossies that reminded me of Ouija and Diane Arbus. Bobby Jill gasped and turned away. Deke grunted softly as if he'd been struck a blow. Miss Ellie shuffled through them stoically, but her face lost all color, except for the 2 balls of rouge flaming on her cheeks. In the first 2, Sadie's cheek hung in ragged flaps. That I had seen on Wednesday night and was prepared for. What I wasn't prepared for was the stroke victim droop of her mouth and the slack wad of the flesh below her left eye. It gave her a clownish look that made me want to thump my head on the table of the small conference room the doctor had appropriated for our meeting, or maybe this would be better, to rush down to the morgue where Johnny Clayton lay so I could beat on him some more. "When this young woman's parents arrive this evening," Ellerton said, "I will be tactful and hopeful, because parents deserve tact and hope." He frowned. "Although one might have expected them sooner, given the gravity of Mrs. Clayton's Miss Dunhill," Ellie said with quiet savagery. "She was legally divorced from that monster." "Yes, quite. I stand corrected. At any rate, you are her friends, and I believe you deserve less tact and more truth." He looked dispassionately at one of the photographs and tapped Sadie's torn cheek with a short, clean fingernail. "This can be improved, but never put right. Not with the techniques now at my disposal. Perhaps a year from now, when the tissue has fully healed, I might be able to repair the worst of the dysymmetry." Tears began to run down Bobby Jill's cheeks. She took Mike's hand. "The permanent damage to her looks is unfortunate," Ellerton said, "but there are other problems as well. The facial nerve has been cut. She is going to have problems eating on the left side of her mouth. The droop in the eye you see in these photographs will be with her for the rest of her life, and her tear duct has been partially severed. Yet her sight may not be impaired. We'll hope not." He sighed and spread his hands. "Given the promise of wonderful stuff like microsurgery and nerve regeneration, we may be able to do more with cases like this in 20 or 30 years. For now, all I can say is I'll do my best to repair all the damage that is reparable." Mike spoke up for the first time. His tone was bitter. "Too bad we don't live in 1990. Huh." It was a silent, dispirited little group that walked out of the hospital that afternoon. At the edge of the parking lot, Miss Ellie touched my sleeve. "I should have listened to you, George. I am so sorry." "I'm not sure it would have made any difference," I said. "But if you want to make it up to me, ask Freddie Quinlan to give me a call. He's the real estate guy who helped me when I first came to Jody. I want to be close to Sadie this summer, and that means I need a place to rent." "You can stay with me," Deke said. "I have plenty of room." I turned to him. "Are you sure?" "You'd be doing me a favor." "I'll be happy to pay." He waved it away. "You can kick in for groceries. That'll be fine." He and Ellie had come in Deke's ranch wagon. I watched them pull out, then trudged to my Chevrolet, which now seemed, probably unfairly, a bad luck car. Never had I less wanted to go back to West Neely, where I would no doubt hear Lee taking out on Marina his frustrations over missing General Walker. "Mr. A?" It was Mike. Bobby Jill stood a few paces back with her arms folded tightly beneath her breasts. She looked cold and unhappy. "Yes, Mike." "Who's going to pay Miss Dunhill's hospital bills? And for all those surgeries he talked about, does she have insurance?" "Some, but nowhere near enough, not for a thing like this." I thought of her parents, but the fact that they still hadn't shown up yet was troubling. They couldn't blame her for what Clayton had done, could they? I didn't see how, but I had come from a world where women were for the most part treated as equals. 1963 never seemed more like a foreign country to me than it did at that moment. "I'll help as much as I can," I said, but how much would that be? My cash reserves were deep enough to get me through another few months, but not enough to pay for half a dozen facial reconstruction procedures. I didn't want to go back to Faith Financial on Greenville Avenue, but I supposed I would if I had to. The Kentucky Derby was coming up in less than a month, and according to the bookie section of Al's notes, the winner was going to be Chateau Gay. A long shot. 1,000 on the nose would net $7 or $8 grand, enough to take care of Sadie's hospital stay and, at 1963 rates, at least some of the follow-up surgeries. "I have an idea," Mike said, then glanced over his shoulder. Bobby Jill gave him an encouraging smile. That is, me and Bobby Jill do. Bobby Jill and I, Mike. You're not a kid anymore, so don't talk like one. Right. Sorry. If you can come back into the coffee shop for 10 minutes or so, we'll lay it on you. I went. We drank coffee. I listened to their idea and agreed. Sometimes when the past harmonizes with itself, the wise man clears his throat and sings along. There was a whopper of an argument in the apartment above me that evening. Baby June added her nickel's worth, wailing her head off. I didn't bother to eavesdrop. The yelling would be in Russian for the most part anyway. Then around 8, an unaccustomed silence fell. I assumed they'd gone to bed 2 hours or so earlier than their usual time, and that was a relief. I was thinking about going to bed myself when the de Mohrenschildt's yacht of a Cadillac pulled up at the curb. Jean slid out. George popped out with his usual jack-in-the-box elan. He opened the rear door behind the driver's seat and brought out a large stuffed rabbit with improbable purple fur. I gawked at this through the slit in the drapes for a moment before the penny dropped. Tomorrow was Easter Sunday. They headed for the outside stairs. She walked. George, in the lead, trotted. His pounding footfalls on the ramshackle steps shook the whole building. I heard startled voices over my head, muffled but clearly questioning. Footfalls hurried across my ceiling, making the overhead light fixture in the living room rattle. Did the Oswalds think it was the Dallas police coming to make an arrest? Or maybe one of the FBI agents who'd been keeping tabs on Lee while he and his family were living on Mercedes Street? I hoped the little bastard's heart was in his throat, choking him. There was a flurry of knocks on the door at the top of the stairs, and de Mohrenschild called jovially, "Open up, Lee! Open up, you heathen!" The door opened. I donned my earphones but heard nothing. Then, just as I was deciding to try the mic in the Tupperware bowl, either Lee or Marina turned on the lamp with the bug in it. It was working again, at least for the time being. "For the baby," Jean was saying. "Oh, thank," Marina said. "Thanks very much. Jean, so kind." "Don't just stand there, comrade. Get us something to drink," de Mohrenschildt's said. He sounded like he'd had a few belts already. "I only have tea," Lee said. He sounded petulant and half awake. "'Tis fine. I've got something here in my pocket that'll get it up on its feet." I could almost see him wink. Marina and Jean lapsed into Russian. Lee and de Mohrenschildt, their heavier footfalls unmistakable, started toward the kitchen area, where I knew I'd lose them. The women were standing close to the lamp, and their voices would cover the conversation of the men. Then Jean, in English, "Oh, my goodness, is that the gun?" Everything stopped, including, so it felt, my heart. Marina laughed. It was a tinkling little cocktail party laugh. Ha ha ha! Artificial as hell. "He lose job. We have no money, and this crazy person buy rifle. I say, put in closet, you crazy idiot, so it don't upset my pregnancy." "I wanted to do some target shooting, that's all," Lee said. "I was pretty good in the Marines. Never shot Maggie's drawers a single time." Another silence. It seemed to go on forever. Then de Mohrenschildt's big hail-fellow laugh boomed out. "Come on, don't bullshit a bullshitter." "How'd you miss him, Lee?" "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." "General Walker, boy, someone almost splattered his Negro-hating brains all over his office wall at that house of his on Turtle Creek." "You mean you didn't know?" "I haven't been reading the papers just lately." "Oh," Jean said, "don't I see the Times Herald over there on that stool?" "I mean, I don't read the news. Too depressing, just the funny pages and the want ads. Big Brother says get a job or the baby starves." "So you weren't the one who took that pot shot, eh?" de Mohrenschildt asked. Teasing him? Baiting him? The question was why? Because de Mohrenschildt would never in his wildest dreams have believed a pipsqueak like Ozzie Rabbit was the shooter last Wednesday night, or because he knew that Lee was? Maybe because Jean had noticed the rifle? I wished with all my heart that the women weren't there. Given a chance to listen to Lee and his peculiar amigo talk man to man, my questions might have been answered. As it was, I still could not be sure. You think I'd be crazy enough to shoot at someone with J. Edgar Hoover looking over my shoulder? Lee sounded like he was trying to get into the spirit of the thing, josh along with George instead of sing along with Mitch. But he wasn't doing a very good job. Nobody thinks you shot at anybody, Lee, Jean said in a placating voice. Just promise that when your baby starts to walk, you find a safer place in the closet for that rifle of yours. Irina replied to this in Russian, but I'd glimpsed the baby in the side yard from time to time and knew what she was saying, that June was walking already. Junie will enjoy the nice present, Lee said, but we don't celebrate Easter. We're atheists. Maybe he was, but according to Al's notes, Marina, with the help of her admirer, George Boo, had had June secretly baptized right around the time of the missile crisis. So have we, de Mohrenschildt said. That's why we celebrate the Easter Bunny. He had moved closer to the lamp, and his roar of laughter half deafened me. They talked for another 10 minutes, mixing English and Russian. Then Jean said, We'll leave you in peace now. I think we turned you out of bed. No, we were up, Lee said. Thanks for dropping by. George said, We'll talk soon, Lee, eh? You can come to the country club. We'll organize the waiters into a collective. Sure. They were moving toward the door now. De Mohrenschildt said something else, but it was too low for me to catch more than a few words. They might have been, get it back, or got your back, although I didn't think that was common slang in the 60s. When did you get it back? Was that what he said? As in, when did you get the rifle back? I replayed the tape half a dozen times, but at super slow speed there was just no way to tell. I lay awake long after the Oswalds had gone to sleep. I was still awake at 2 a.m. when June cried briefly and was soothed back to dreamland by her mother. I thought of Sadie, sleeping the unrestful sleep of morphine at Parkland Hospital. The room was ugly and the bed was narrow, but I would have been able to sleep there. I was sure of it. I thought about de Mohrenschildt, that manic shirt-ripping stage actor. What did you say, George? What did you say there at the end? Was it, when did you get it back? Was it, cheer up, things aren't so black? Was it, don't let this set you back? Or something else entirely? At last I slept and dreamed I was at a carnival with Sadie. We came to a shooting gallery where Lee stood with his rifle socked into the hollow of his shoulder. The guy behind the counter was George de Mohrenschildt. Lee fired 3 times and didn't hit a single target. Sorry, son, de Mohrenschildt said. No prizes for guys who shoot magistrators. Then he turned to me and grinned. Step right up, son. You may have better luck. Somebody's going to kill the president. Why not you? I woke with a start in the first weak light of the day. Above me, the Oswalds slept on. Easter Sunday afternoon found me back in Dealey Plaza, sitting on a park bench, looking at the forbidding brick cube of the school book depository and wondering what to do next. In 10 days, Lee was going to leave Dallas for New Orleans, the city of his birth. He would get a job greasing machinery at a coffee company and rent the apartment on Magazine Street. After spending 2 weeks or so with Ruth Payne and her children in Irving, Marina and June would join him. I wouldn't follow, not with Sadie facing a long period of recovery and an uncertain future. Was I going to kill Lee between this Easter Sunday and the 24th? I probably could. Since losing his job at Jagger's Child Stovall, he spent most of his time either in the apartment or handing out Fair Play for Cuba leaflets in downtown Dallas. Once in a while, he went to the public library, where he seemed to have given up Ayn Rand and Karl Marx in favor of Zane Grey westerns. Shooting him on the street or at the library on Yonge Street would be a recipe for instant incarceration. But if I did it in the upstairs apartment, while Marina was in Irving helping Ruth Payne improve her Russian, I could knock on the door and put a bullet in his head when he opened it. Done deal. No risk of shooting Maggie's drawers at point-blank range. The problem was the aftermath. I'd have to run. If I didn't, I'd be the first person the police would question. I was the downstairs neighbor, after all. I could claim I wasn't there when it happened, and they might buy that for a while, but how long would it be before they discovered that the George Amberson of West Neely Street was the same George Amberson who just happened to be at a scene of violence on Beetree Lane in Jody not long before? That would merit checking, and checking would soon reveal that George Amberson's teaching certificate came from a degree mill in Oklahoma, and George Amberson's references were phony. At that point, I'd very likely be arrested. The police would obtain a court order to open my safe deposit box if they found out I had one, and they probably would. Mr. Richard Link, my banker, would see my name and or picture in the paper and come forward. What would the police make of my memoir? That I had a motive for shooting Oswald, no matter how crazy. No, I'd have to run for the rabbit hole, ditching the Chevy somewhere in Oklahoma or Arkansas. Then taking a bus or train, and if I made it back to 2011, I could never use the rabbit hole again without causing a reset. That would mean leaving Sadie behind, forever, disfigured and alone. Of course he ran out on me, she would think. He talked a good game about smallpox scars being as pretty as dimples, but once he heard Ellerton's prognosis, ugly now, ugly forever, he headed for the hills. She might not even blame me. That was the most rotten possibility of all. But no, I could think of a worse one. Suppose I got back to 2011 and discovered that Kennedy had been assassinated on November 22nd after all. I still wasn't positive Oswald was on his own. Who was I to say that 10,000 conspiracy theorists were wrong, especially based on the few scraps of information all my haunting and stalking had gleaned? Maybe I'd check Wikipedia and discover the shooter had been on the grassy knoll after all, or on the roof of the combined jail and county courthouse on Houston Street, armed with a sharpshooter's rifle instead of a mail-order Mannlicher Carcano, or hiding in a sewer on Elm Street and watching for Kennedy's approach with a periscope, as some of the wilder conspiracy buffs claimed. De Mohrenschildt was a CIA asset of some kind. Even Al Templeton, who was almost positive that Oswald had acted alone, acknowledged that much. Al was convinced he was just a little asset, passing on bits of South and Central American tittle-tattle to keep his various oil speculations afloat. But what if he was more? The CIA had loathed Kennedy ever since he refused to send in American troops to back the beleaguered partisans at the Bay of Pigs. His graceful handling of the missile crisis had deepened that loathing. The spooks had wanted to use it as a pretext to end the Cold War once and for all because they were positive the Ballyhood missile gap was a fiction. You could read much of this in the daily papers, sometimes between the lines of the news stories, sometimes stated baldly in the op-ed essays. Suppose certain rogue elements in the CIA had talked George de Mohrenschildt into a much more dangerous mission. Not killing the president himself, but recruiting several less-than-balanced individuals who would be willing to do the job. Would de Mohrenschildt say yes to such an offer? I thought he might. He and John lived big, but I had no real idea how they supported the Cadillac, the country club, and their sprawl of a house on Simpson Stewart Road. Serving as the cutout, a dead short between a targeted U.S. president and an agency that theoretically existed to do his bidding, that would be dangerous work. But if the potential gain were big enough, a man living above his means might be tempted. And it wouldn't even have to be a cash payoff. That was the beauty of it. just those wonderful oil leases in Venezuela, Haiti, and the DR. Also, such work might appeal to a grandiose strutter like de Mohrenschildt. He liked action, and he didn't care for Kennedy. Thanks to John Clayton, I couldn't even eliminate de Mohrenschildt from the Walker attempt. It was Oswald's rifle, yes, but suppose Lee had found himself unable to fire it when the time came. I thought it would be just like the little weasel to choke at the critical moment. I could see de Mohrenschildt snatching the Carcano out of Lee's trembling hands and snarling, "Give it to me, I'll do it myself." Would de Mohrenschildt have felt capable of making the shot from behind the garbage can Lee meant to use as a sniper's bench? One line in Al's notes made me think the answer was yes. "Won skeet shooting championship at Country Club in 1961. If I killed Oswald and Kennedy died anyway, it would all be for nothing. And then what? Rinse and repeat? Kill Frank Dunning again? Save Carolyn Poulin again? Drive to Dallas again? Meet Sadie again? She would be unmarked, and that was good. I would know what her crazy ex-husband looked like, dye job and all, and this time I could stop him before he got close. Also good. But just thinking about going through all of it again exhausted me. Nor did I think I could kill Lee in cold blood, or at least not based on the circumstantial evidence I had. With Frank Dunning, I'd known for sure. I had seen. So, what was my next move? It was 4:15, and I decided my next move was visiting Sadie. I started for my car, which was parked on Main Street. On the corner of Main and Houston, just past the old courthouse, I had a sensation of being watched, and turned around. No one was on the sidewalk behind me. It was the depository that was watching. All those blank windows overlooking Elm Street, where the presidential motorcade would arrive some 200 days from that Easter Sunday. They were serving dinner on Sadie's floor when I arrived. Chop suey. The smell brought back a vivid image of the way the blood had gushed over John Clayton's hand and forearm before he fell to the carpet mercifully face down. "Hi there, Mr. Amberson," the head nurse said as I signed in. She was a graying woman in a starched white cap and uniform. A pocket watch was pinned to her formidable bosom. She was looking at me from behind a barricade of bouquets. "There was a fair amount of shouting in there last night. I'm only telling you because you're her fiancé, right?" "Right," I said. Certainly it was what I wanted to be, slashed face or no slashed face. The nurse leaned toward me between two overloaded vases. A few daisies brushed through her hair. "Look, I don't ordinarily gossip about my patients, and I ream out the younger nurses who do, but the way her parents treated her wasn't right. I guess I don't entirely blame them for riding down from Georgia with that lunatic's folks, but..." "Wait, are you telling me the Dunhills and the Claytons carpooled?" "I guess they were all palsy-walsy back in happier days, so all right, fine. But to tell her that while they were visiting their daughter, their good friends, the Claytons, were downstairs signing their son's body out of the morgue?" She shook her head. "Daddy never said boo, but that woman." She looked around to make sure we were still alone, saw we were, and turned back to me. Her plain country face was grim with outrage. She never shut up. One question about how her daughter was feeling, then it was the poor Claytons this and the poor Claytons that. Your Miss Dunhill held her tongue until her mother said what a shame it was that they'd have to change churches again. Then the girl lost her temper and started shouting at them to get out. "Good for her," I said. "I heard her yell, 'Do you want to see what your good friend's son did to me?' And honey pie, that's when I started running. She was trying to pull off the bandages, and the mother, she was leaning forward, Mr. Amberson, eager. She actually wanted to look. I hustled them out and got one of the residents to give Miss Dunhill a shot and quiet her down. The father, a little mouse of a man, tried to apologize for his wife. She didn't know she was upsetting Sadie, he says. Well, I says back, what about you? Cat got your tongue? And you know what the woman said just before they got on the elevator? I shook my head. She said, I can't blame him. How can I? He used to play in our yard, and he was just the sweetest boy. Can you believe that? I could, because I thought I'd already met Mrs. Dunhill, in a manner of speaking, on West 7th Street, chasing after her older son and yelling at the top of her lungs. Stop, Robert, don't walk so fast. I'm not done with you. You may find her overly emotional, the nurse said. I just wanted you to know there's a good reason for it. She wasn't overly emotional. I would have preferred that. If there's such a thing as serene depression, that's where Sadie's head was at on that Easter evening. She was sitting in her chair, at least, with an untouched plate of chop suey in front of her. She'd lost weight. Her long body seemed to float in the white hospital johnny she pulled around her when she saw me. She smiled, though, on the side of her face that still could, and turned her good cheek to be kissed. Hello, George. I'd better call you that, don't you think? Maybe so. How are you, honey? They say I'm better, but my face feels like someone dipped it in kerosene and then set it on fire. It's because they're taking me off the pain medications. God forbid I get hooked on dope. If you need more, I can talk to somebody. She shook her head. It makes me fuzzy, and I need to think. Also, it makes it hard to keep control of my emotions. I had quite the shouting match with my mother and father. There was only the one chair, unless you wanted to count the commode squatting in the corner, so I sat on the bed. The head nurse filled me in based on what she overheard. You had every right to blow your top. Maybe, but what good does it do? Mom will never change. She can talk for hours about how having me almost killed her, but she has very little feeling for anyone else. It's lack of tact, but it's lack of something more. There's a word for it, but I can't remember it. Empathy? That's it. And she has a very sharp tongue. Over the years, it's whittled my dad away to a stub. He rarely says anything these days. You don't need to see them again. I think I do. I liked her calm, detached voice less and less. Mama says they'll fix up my old room, and I really don't have any place else to go. Your home's in Jody, and your work. I think we talked about that. I'm going to tender my resignation. No, Sadie, no, that's a very bad idea. She smiled as best she could. You sound like Miss Ellie, who didn't believe you when you said Johnny was a danger. She thought about this, then added, Of course, neither did I. I never stopped being a fool about him, did I? You have a house. That's true, and mortgage payments I can't make. I'll have to let it go. I'll make the payments. That got through. She looked shocked. You can't afford to do that? I can, actually. Which was true for a while at least. Plus there was always the Kentucky Derby and Chateau Gay. I'm moving out of Dallas and in with Deke. He's not charging me rent, which frees up plenty for house payments. A tear crept to the edge of her right eye and trembled there. You're kind of missing the point. I can't take care of myself. Not yet. And I won't be taken in unless it's at home, where Mom will hire a nurse to help with the nasty bits. I've got a little pride left, not much, but a little. I'll take care of you. She stared at me, wide-eyed. What? You heard me. And when it comes to me, Sadie, you can stick your pride where the sun doesn't shine. I happen to love you. And if you love me, you'll stop talking mad shit about going home to your crocodile of a mother. She managed a faint smile at that, then sat quiet thinking. hands in the lap of her flimsy cover-up. "You came to Texas to do something, and it wasn't to nurse a school librarian who was too silly to know she was in danger. My business in Dallas is on hold." "Can it be?" "Yes." And as simply as that, it was decided. Lee was going to New Orleans, and I was going back to Jody. The past kept fighting me, and it was going to win this round. "You need time, Sadie, and I have time. We might as well spend it together." "You can't want me." She said this in a voice just above a whisper. "Not the way I am now. But I do." She looked at me with eyes that were afraid to hope, and hoped anyway. "Why would you?" "Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." The good side of her mouth began to tremble. The tears spilled onto her cheek and was followed by others. "If I didn't have to go back to Savannah, if I didn't have to live with them, with her, maybe then I could be, I don't know, just a little bit all right." I took her into my arms. "You're going to be a lot better than that." "Jake." Her voice was muffled with tears. "Would you do something for me before you go?" "What, honey?" "Take away that goddamn chop suey. The smell is making me sick." The nurse with the full-back shoulders and the watch pinned to her bosom was Rhonda McGinley. And on the 18th of April, she insisted on pushing Sadie's wheelchair not only to the elevator, but all the way out to the curb, where Deke waited with the passenger door of his station wagon open. "Don't let me see you back here, sugar pie," Nurse McKinley said after we'd helped Sadie into the car. Sadie smiled distractedly and said nothing. She was, not to put too fine a point on it, stoned to the high blue sky. Dr. Ellerton had been in that morning to examine her face, an excruciating process that had necessitated extra pain medication. McGinley turned to me. "She's going to need a lot of TLC in the next few months." "I'll do my best." We got rolling. 10 miles south of Dallas, Deke said, "Take that away from her and throw it out the window. I'm minding this damn traffic." Sadie had fallen asleep with a cigarette smoldering between her fingers. I leaned over the seat and plucked it away. She moaned when I did it and said, "Oh, don't, Johnny. Please don't." I met Deke's eyes, only for a second, but enough for me to see we were thinking the same thing. Long road ahead. Long road. I moved into Deke's Spanish-style home on Sam Houston Road, at least for public consumption. In truth, I moved in with Sadie at 135 Beetree Lane. I was afraid of what we might find when we first helped her inside, and I think that Sadie was too, stoned or not. But Ms. Ellie and Joe Pete from the home ec department had recruited a few trustworthy girls who had spent an entire day before Sadie's return cleaning, polishing, and scrubbing every trace of Clayton's filth off the walls. The living room rug had been taken up and replaced. The new one was industrial gray, hardly an exciting color, but probably a wise choice. Gray things hold so few memories. Her mutilated clothing had been whisked away and replaced with new stuff. Sadie never said a word about the new rug and the different clothes. I'm not sure she even noticed them. I spent my days there, cooking her meals, working in her little garden, which would sicken but not quite die in another hot Central Texas summer, and reading Bleak House to her. We also became involved in several of the afternoon soaps, The Secret Storm, Young Dr. Malone, From These Roots, and our personal favorite, The Edge of Night. She changed the parting in her hair from the center to the right, cultivating a Veronica Lake style that would cover the worst of the scarring when the bandages eventually came off. Not that they would for a long time. The first of her reconstructive surgeries, a team effort involving 4 doctors, was scheduled for August 5th. Ellerton said there would be at least 4 more. I would drive back to Deke's after Sadie and I had our supper, which she rarely did more than pick at, because small towns are full of big eyes attached to gabby mouths. It was best that those big eyes should see my car in Deke's driveway after the sun went down. Once it was dark, I walked the 2 miles back to Sadie's, where I slept on the new hide-a-bed sofa until 5 in the morning. It was almost always broken rest, because nights when Sadie didn't awaken me, screaming and thrashing her way out of bad dreams, were rare. In the daytime, Johnny Clayton was dead. After dark, he still stalked her with his gun and knife. I would go to her and soothe her as best I could. Sometimes she would trudge out to the living room with me and smoke a cigarette before shuffling back to bed, always pressing her hair down protectively over the bad side of her face. She would not let me change the bandages. That she did herself in the bathroom, with the door closed. After one especially terrible nightmare, I came in to find her standing naked by her bed and sobbing. She had become shockingly thin. Her nightgown was puddled at her feet. She heard me and turned around, one arm across her breasts and the other hand over her crotch. Her hair swung back to her right shoulder, where it actually belonged, and I saw the swollen scars, the heavy stitching, the fallen rumpled flesh over her cheekbone. "Get out!" she screamed. "Don't look at me like this! Why can't you get out?" "Sadie, what is it? Why did you take off your nightgown? What's wrong?" "I wet my bed, okay? I have to change it, so please get out and let me put some clothes on." I went to the foot of the bed, grabbed the quilt that was folded there, and wrapped it around her. When I turned one end up in a kind of collar that hit her cheek, she calmed. "Go in the living room and be careful you don't trip on that thing. Have a smoke. I'll change the bed." "No, Jake, it's dirty." I took her by the shoulders. "That's what Clayton would say, and he's dead. A little piss is all it is." "Are you sure?" "Yes. But before you go," I turned down the makeshift collar. She flinched and closed her eyes, but stood still, only bearing it, but I still thought it was progress. I kissed the hanging flesh that had been her cheek, and then turned the quilt up again to hide it. "How can you?" she asked without opening her eyes. "It's awful." "Nah, it's just another part of the you I love, Sadie. Now, go in the other room while I change these sheets." When it was done, I offered to get into bed with her until she fell asleep. She flinched as she had when I'd turned down the quilt and shook her head. "I can't, Jake. I'm sorry." Little by slowly, I told myself as I plodded across town to Deke's in the first gray light of morning. Little by slowly. On April 24th, I told Deke I had something I needed to do in Dallas and asked him if he'd stay with Sadie until I got back around 9. He agreed willingly enough, and at 5 that afternoon, I was sitting across from the Greyhound Terminal on South Polk Street, near the intersection of Highway 77 and the still new 4-lane I-20. I was reading, or pretending to read, the latest James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me. At 1:30 p.m, a station wagon pulled into the parking lot next to the terminal. Ruth Payne was driving. Lee got out, went around to the rear, and opened the door gate. Marina, with June in her arms, emerged from the back seat. Ruth Payne stayed behind the wheel. Lee had only 2 items of luggage, an olive green duffel bag and a quilted gun case, the kind with handles. He carried them to an idling Cena cruiser. The driver took the suitcase and the rifle and stowed them in the open luggage hold, after a cursory glance at Lee's ticket. Lee went to the door of the bus, then turned and embraced his wife, kissing her on both cheeks and then the mouth. He took the baby and nuzzled beneath her chin. June laughed. Lee laughed with her, but I saw tears in his eyes. He kissed June on the forehead, gave her a hug, then returned her to Marina and ran up the steps of the bus without looking back. Marina walked to the station wagon where Ruth Payne was now standing. June held her arms out to the older woman, who took her with a smile. They stood there for a while, watching passengers board, then drove off. I stayed where I was until the bus pulled out at 6 p.m., right on time. The sun, going down bloody in the west, flashed across the destination window, momentarily obscuring what was printed there. Then I could read it again. 3 words that meant Lee Harvey Oswald was out of my life, at least for a while. New Orleans Express. I watched it climb the entrance ramp to I-20 East, then walked the 2 blocks to where I'd parked my car, and drove back to Jody. Hunch think. That again. I paid the May rent on the West Neely Street apartment, even though I needed to start watching my dollars and had no concrete reason to do so. All I had was an unformed but strong feeling that I should keep a base of operations in Dallas. 2 days before the Kentucky Derby ran, I drove to Greenville Avenue, fully intending to put down $500 on Chateauguay to place. That, I reasoned, would be less memorable than betting on the nag to win. I parked 4 blocks down from Faith Financial and locked my car, a necessary precaution in that part of town, even at 11 in the morning. I walked briskly at first, but then, once more, for no concrete reason, my steps began to lag. Half a block from the betting parlor masquerading as a street-front loan operation, I came to a full stop. Once again I could see the bookie, sans eyeshade this forenoon, leaning in the doorway of his establishment and smoking a cigarette. Standing there in a strong flood of sunlight, bracketed by the sharp shadows of the doorway, he looked like a figure in an Edward Hopper painting. There was no chance he saw me that day because he was staring at a car parked across the street. It was a cream-colored Lincoln with a green license plate. Above the numbers were the words, Sunshine State, which did not mean it was a harmonic, which certainly didn't mean it belonged to Eduardo Gutierrez of Tampa, the bookie who used to smile and say, "Here comes my Yankee from Yankee Land," the one who had almost certainly had my beachfront house burned down. All the same, I turned and walked back to my car with the $500 I'd intended to bet still in my pocket. Hunch think.